Chapter 2356. Yi Xian couldn't figure out what this guy's true form was. However, Yi Xian didn't need to figure it out. In Yi Xian's heart, no matter what he wasn't worth paying attention to. System, detect this person's cultivation. Ding. System notification, target. 8th grade mid-divine king. 8th grade mid-divine king. Is he trying to crush Lu Hanzhan? Sure enough, when Yi Xian was checking the person's cultivation, the person said to Lu Hanzhan, do you dare to fight with me? Lu Hanzhan was about to speak when Yi Xian's voice sounded, come back. Lu Hanzhan's body stiffened. It was a humiliation to retreat when the enemy challenged him. He didn't want to retreat, but he didn't dare to disobey the orders of the provincial governor. 135-7924? 6810 GGGGGD. My lord, I am willing to fight to the death. Yi Xian looked at this guy. From his words, he could tell that he knew that he wasn't a match for the enemy. However, he didn't want to lose face, so he didn't want to retreat. All right, the enemy is despicable and shameless. He wants to kill you by taking turns. However, I have other plans for you. So you don't have to rush to your death. All right, retreat. Yi Xian's words were very clever. Even if he left Lu Hanzhan in front of him, it was also a reward for him. Lu Hanzhan couldn't say no. At this moment, many people were looking at Lu Hanzhan with envious gazes. The provincial governor had said that he would have other arrangements for him. One had to know that this provincial governor had come from nowhere. How could the various forces in the 9 directions 60,000 territories not know about this? However, the provincial governor brought 10,000 divine palace guards with him. This proved that the divine master valued him highly. In other words, as long as he hugged the provincial governor's thigh, it would be hard for him not to prosper. At this time, everyone was nervously waiting for Yi Xian to send them to fight. Suddenly, Yi Xian pointed at an old man. Do you dare to fight? I am willing to serve the regional commander. The old man was extremely excited, as if he had instantly become a few thousand years younger. His face actually glowed. It's actually him. Someone muttered softly. It turned out that the old man's original sect was almost completely destroyed because of a mystic realm exploration. At this time, he didn't even have more than 100 disciples. Strictly speaking, he was already considered a cripple. But who would have thought that the provincial governor would take a fancy to him? In an instant, countless people were extremely envious. The old man naturally knew that this was a rare opportunity. He had already decided that even if he had to die, he would take down the enemy. Of course, Yi Xian had only chosen him because he was coincidentally a 9th grade mid-tier divine realm cultivator. He had no other intentions. The battle erupted once again, but this time, the duration of the battle was unexpectedly short. It was only one move, but the result was already decided. As soon as the old man came out, his whole body suddenly emitted a strong flame. Then he roared, divine power, heavenly fire annihilation. This guy had actually used all his strength in the first move. This move, heavenly fire annihilation, was to condense all the nomological power on his fist, using this one punch to decide the outcome. It could be said that the old man only had this one chance to attack, because if this punch didn't take down the enemy, he was equivalent to waiting for death. However, the person opposite him was actually a guy who used ice element nomological laws. Then, from the beginning, he was destined to be a tragedy. With a punch, the sky changed color. The entire sky seemed to be completely dyed red, and a huge fireball exploded from the old man's hand. Although the enemy immediately put up a defense, and even released his strongest defense, it was still useless. Numerous ice shields appeared in an instant. There were tens of thousands of ice shields, and each ice shield was like a mirror. Moreover, that person could pass through these ice shields at will. With this move, even if he had to exhaust himself, he could exhaust countless opponents to death, and even fight above his level. Unfortunately, he had met Yi Xian, who could see through everything, Yi Xian. Therefore, when the tens of thousands of ice shields appeared, they were surrounded by countless flames, and almost all of them melted at the same time. One punch, just one punch, and the old man had killed his enemy. Even he couldn't believe such a result. Humph, human race official, I want to challenge you. Do you dare to fight me? Suddenly, a voice rang out. Along with this voice, Countless Yao gods quickly opened up a path. A young man walked out from among them. "Greetings, Your Highness. Your Highness is eternal." Clearly, this Yao god's status was extraordinary. From the moment he appeared, even the people in the demon god realm in this area were extremely respectful. "Your Highness? Could it be the prince of the demon god realm?" Yi Xian frowned slightly, a little puzzled. However, since this guy had come to challenge him, then Yi Xian had to take a good look. "System, give me a deep scan of this person. I want to know his true identity and strength." Ding. System notification. Scanning data, analyzing character. Ding. System notification. Target specified. Demon God Clan's 8 Heavenly Kings, 7th son of Heavenly King Kuan Pang, 7th Prince of Kuan Pang. 2nd grade Lower Godly King. 2nd grade Lower Godly King? Yi Xian smirked. Was this guy looking for death? Did he really think that just because Yi Xian was a peak godly monarch, he couldn't do anything to a godly king? He was Yi Xian, the one and only Yi Xian. Even if his strength was higher, Yi Xian wouldn't be afraid, let alone a mere 2nd grade godly king. The son of a heavenly king? Did that mean that he was even higher than Yi Xian? However, since he was looking for death, then Yi Xian would fulfill his wish. Suddenly, the system notification rang again. Yi Xian frowned slightly. Had a powerful innate divine ability? However, so what? Even so, Yi Xian wasn't worried at all. Yi Xian now had 5 eternal points, which gave Yi Xian the confidence to speak. With 5 eternal points, as long as his opponent didn't surpass the godly king realm, Yi Xian would be invincible. Don't forget, the eternal domain of the eternal bloodline. 5 eternal points was just enough to use the eternal domain. His strength would increase by 100 times in an instant. Not only his realm, but also Yi Xian's strength, agility, mastery of laws, and everything else. As long as he used the eternal domain, his strength would increase by 100 times. This was enough for Yi Xian to ignore any godly king realm, godly monarch realm. Chapter 2357. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation, you want to challenge me? Yi Xian asked calmly. 135-7924? 6810 GGGGGD, yes, it's you. You and I are the supreme commanders of this battlefield. Let's fight to determine the outcome of this war. If I win, you hand over the divine talisman race, and I win. Then, we'll take a step back. What do you think? So they want to decide the outcome of this battle? However, why do these guys want the divine talisman race so badly? What kind of secret is the divine talisman race hiding? Alright, I agree. We'll decide the outcome of this battle. Let's fight one-on-one. Yi Xian replied calmly. Regional Governor, please reconsider. Sir, you mustn't. That's right, sir. The enemy is a divine king, and he's from the special Kuan Pang race. Sir, please reconsider. Many people were worried when they heard that Yi Xian had actually agreed to the challenge. No matter what, they were all Yi Xian's subordinates now. If Yi Xian were to die in battle, they would definitely be severely punished. In fact, almost all of the people by Yi Xian's side would be exterminated. The Kunlun Divine Domain had a clear rule. If an official like the regional governor died, the people around him would be exterminated for failing to protect him. Therefore, they couldn't help but worry. Yi Xian waved his hand and said calmly, "It's fine. I don't care about a mere Kuan Pang." The experts were extremely anxious. Even though Yi Xian had already said so, they were still afraid that something might happen. However, they had no right to refuse Yi Xian's order. Disobeying Yi Xian's order was also a serious crime. In an instant, the experts on the human side were extremely worried. On the other hand, the people from the demon god domain were all delighted. This human race official is really stupid. He actually wants to fight with the 7th prince. The 7th prince has the Kuan Pang body. He can erupt with the battle strength of a mid-divine king. I think this human race official is courting death. Isn't that so? Can't you see that this human race official is still very young? However, if we can kill him, I'm sure we'll be rewarded greatly. Haha, the 7th prince is mighty. In the blink of an eye, the morale of the demon god realm was completely restored. Yi Xian smiled faintly. Of course, he could hear the discussions around him. However, so what if he was the Kuan-Pang or the seventh prince? He was Yi Xian. Could it be that he was afraid of a mere seventh prince? Yi Xian moved and appeared in the center of the battlefield. Brat, I didn't expect you to have such guts. Don't worry, I'll spare your life because I suddenly feel that capturing you alive might be more useful. The seventh prince said with a smile. Is that so? That's exactly what I was thinking. If I capture you alive, I might be able to exchange it for some good stuff. As he said this, Wei Zhentian transformed into the Godslayer. The two Godslayer swords hovered around Yi Xian, ready to charge out at any time. Haha, human race brat, you're really arrogant. Suddenly, the seventh prince waved his hand, creating countless phantoms that attacked Yi Xian. Yi Xian did not hesitate. He summoned the thousand beast sword servants and the deity flower sword servants and charged forward as well. However, what happened next was beyond Yi Xian's expectations. Before Yi Xian could use the thousand beasts feast, the phantoms suddenly rushed into the bodies of the thousand beast sword servants, the deity flower sword servants, and the deity flower sword servants. Although the seventh prince couldn't control them because they were all summoned by Yi Xian, he still caused the thousand beast sword attendants and the others to instantly lose their ability to move. Kuan-Pang transformation, Divine Soul Devour. Someone exclaimed in shock. This was a special ability of the Kuan-Pang race. They used the phantoms to devour the enemy's divine soul. Although it did not really destroy the enemy, it could imprison the enemy's divine soul and then control the enemy's physical body. What's going on? Why can't these puppets be controlled? The seventh prince was slightly astonished. He had always been able to control the soul, but he had failed. Facing the thousand beast sword attendants, although he could control the soul, he could not control the physical body. This was something that he had never encountered before. Even so, it was beyond Yi Xian's expectations. Yi Xian already knew that he couldn't underestimate this seventh prince the first time they'd fought. Otherwise, Yi Xian would probably suffer a huge loss this time. Wei Zhentian, attack! Yi Xian waved his hand, and Wei Zhentian controlled the two Godslayer swords to charge forward. At this moment, the power of the Godslayer swords finally exploded. The special attribute of the Godslayer swords was that when facing the demon gods and other mutated tribes, it would definitely be a critical hit. Under Wei Zhentian's control, the two Godslayer swords always attacked the seventh prince from tricky angles. Although this could not play a decisive role, it was definitely a good support for Yi Xian's actions. At this moment, Yi Xian was going to use the special ability of the Wings of Gods. Fury of the Gods. System, check the power of the Wings of Gods that I have now. I want to use the Fury of the Gods. Yi Xian stared at the seventh prince. He wanted to see how the seventh prince would handle the Fury of the Gods. Ding! System notification. The host currently has 131% of the Wings of Gods power. The host can use 31% of the Fury of the Gods power. 31% of the power. That was enough. Yi Xian suddenly stood still, but his hands abruptly clasped together. The seventh prince was slightly surprised that his move had failed. He suddenly looked at Yi Xian and said arrogantly, "Kid, you're not bad. You can actually break my Kuan-Peng's first change. Let's see how you defend against the next move." Kuan-Peng's 3 change, Heaven Stealing. Suddenly, the seventh prince did not even have time to use his special ability. A vast and mighty aura suddenly burst forth. With Yi Xian as the center, the powerful aura continuously spread out. Yi Xian's lips curled into a faint smile. Go to hell. Damn you. Fury of the Gods. Following Yi Xian's roar, the entire battlefield froze in an instant. This was because at this moment, waves of powerful aura were emitted from the heavens and the earth. Mysterious Dharma figures kept appearing one after another. No one knew who these people were, but everyone knew that they were not ordinary people. What are these? Could it be a fragment of his soul? Who the hell are these people? Regardless of whether they were from the Kunlun god domain or the demon god domain, at this moment, all of their attention was focused on Yi Xian. This was because countless Dharma figures kept appearing and disappearing. Moreover, most of them were rushing towards Yi Xian. These countless Dharma figures filled the entire sky, but their final destination was to become the ball of light in Yi Xian's hand. Chapter 2358. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation, Your Highness, be careful. a person from the demon god's domain shouted. However, his reminder wouldn't be of any help to the seventh prince's current situation. The seventh prince's eyes were filled with shock. Even without anyone's reminder, he could already see how powerful the ball of light in Yi Xian's hand was. Kuan Peng's 18 changes. Kuan Peng's true form. Suddenly, the seventh prince's body expanded rapidly. In the blink of an eye, he turned into a super-divine beast that spanned hundreds of thousands of miles. This was the seventh prince's true form, the Kuan Peng divine beast. However, this Kuan Peng was different from the real Kuan Peng. First of all, it was not as big as the real Kuan Peng. Secondly, there were countless black light screens around it, and many black balls were circling around it. 135, 7924, 6810 GGGGGD. There were even many imprisoned souls that were constantly struggling around his body in an attempt to escape. Go to hell! Fury of the gods! Finally, the light ball in Yi Xian's hand was completed. Then, Yi Xian opened his hands and a pillar of light appeared. This pillar of light expanded continuously. At first, it was less than a meter thick. However, it grew to 100 meters, 1,000 meters, 10,000 meters. The entire sky seemed to be covered by this pillar of light. The soul-stirring power caused countless people to tremble incessantly. What kind of power was this? Was this really a power that a mere divine Lord Realm Fellow could possess? Perhaps even a superior divine king would not be able to do this. The most important thing was the range of this attack. This was a powerful attack that covered half the sky. The powerful beings of the Kunlun god domain could not help but take a few steps back. If they were to stay within that light, they would feel as though they were about to be melted away. This was an extremely mystical feeling. It was as though everything from their flesh to their godheads were being melted away. This strong discomfort forced them to retreat again and again. And this was only the feeling they felt. Then, as the core of the attack, how uncomfortable would the seventh prince be? After revealing his true form, the seventh prince's strength had undoubtedly skyrocketed. However, in the face of Yi Xian's fury of the gods, he could only barely resist. He couldn't even protect his entire body. Around the seventh prince, countless shields of law quickly condensed and then disappeared. They were actually melted by the powerful attack of the wrath of the gods. The seventh prince continued to wail in agony as the air around his body continued to evaporate. His huge body was actually shrinking at this moment. The wrath of the gods was so strong that once the seventh prince's defense failed, it would immediately take away a part of his body. Is this the fusion law? It wasn't just the spectators who were confused. Even Yi Xian couldn't understand why the wrath of the gods' attack would melt the enemy. Fortunately, the system gave Yi Xian an answer. Ding! System notification. Every time the wrath of the gods attacks, it will produce a random attribute. This is because the wrath of the gods is a combination of the power of countless powerful ancient gods. The system notification let Yi Xian know why the fury of the gods was like this. It turned out that this mystique was a random mystique to begin with. The damage it could cause was fixed, but the way it caused the damage was random. Just like what was happening now, it was actually using the melting method to wear down the enemy. The seventh prince was still persisting in using defensive means. Even though the shields of law would disappear soon after they appeared, the seventh prince had no choice but to continue. After all, once he gave up, he would be melted very quickly. His huge body, which was originally hundreds of thousands of miles long, kept shrinking like a fat man trying to lose weight. The 90,000 characters in his body were constantly being melted away. However, the ninth prince had the Kuan Peng body after all. Therefore, the damage was evenly distributed to various parts of his body, resulting in the current situation. Damn it, human, I want you dead. I will definitely make you die a horrible death. The extreme pain almost made the seventh prince lose his mind. After all, this powerful melting was simply causing him extreme pain. Ding! Warning! 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 An unknown change has been detected. Host, please be careful. The system notification suddenly sounded out, causing Yi Xian to frown. An unknown great change? What unknown change? What was the seventh prince trying to do? At this moment, the seventh prince's body was condensing at an extremely fast speed, and the nomological aura around him was becoming stronger and stronger. Kuan Peng's 62 transformations, ultimate body. 62 transformations. The seventh prince has actually cultivated the Kuan Pang transformation to the 62 transformations. Legend has it that the ultimate body can condense a special physique that can ignore all nomological attacks. It seems to be called the eternal body. This physique can completely nullify all nomological powers. Could it be that the legends are true? In ancient times, there really was such a physique that could ignore nomological powers? The people of the demon god domain were boiling with excitement. Even in the history of the demon god domain, there weren't many Kuan Pang clansmen who had successfully cultivated the Kuan Pang 62 transformations. But now, their seventh prince had actually succeeded. This undoubtedly showed how talented the seventh prince was. However, upon hearing this, the first person to be stunned was Yi Xian. After all, Yi Xian now had the eternal bloodline. Eternal bloodline. Eternal body. No matter what, this made Yi Xian think of many things. Could it be that the final result of the Kuan Pang 62 transformations was to become a bloodline like Yi Xian's? However, although Yi Xian's eternal bloodline had the special ability to swallow all nomological powers, it did not have the special ability to ignore nomological attacks. At this moment, Yi Xian actually did not have much of an effect on reducing nomological attacks. But why was the seventh prince's eternal body able to ignore nomological powers? Yi Xian was extremely puzzled. However, there was no other way. At this moment, Yi Xian's wrath of the gods' attack was about to end. Hence, he could only look helplessly at the seventh prince. Human, you deserve to die. I will definitely kill you. The seventh prince's eyes were filled with rage. It turned out that although he had resisted Yi Xian's attack, he had actually paid a heavy price. It turned out that he could only use the 60 transformations at most. As long as he was given time, he would definitely be able to successfully cultivate the 62 transformations. However, it was definitely not now. However, being forced by Yi Feng, the seventh prince could only use a secret technique and activate the 62 transformations in advance. Chapter 2359. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. In other words, the seventh prince would forever remain at the level of the 62 transformations if he did not encounter any special opportunities. Of course, Yi Xian did not know this. Even if Yi Xian knew, he would not care. 135-7924? 6810 GGGGGD. However, at this moment, Yi Xian had no choice but to be cautious. Even the wrath of the gods couldn't defeat this guy. Wasn't this guy too strong? The battle between Yi Xian and the seventh prince had long since surpassed everyone's understanding. One had to know that in the eyes of the crowd, these two people were merely a battle between a peak divine lord and a low-level divine king. However, the power that erupted from them was simply incomparably shocking. The first two battles were between divine kings. However, compared to the battle between Yi Xian and the seventh prince, these two battles were insignificant. It was only now that the experts from the 9 directions and 60,000 domains finally understood why the divine master thought so highly of Yi Xian, and even made him a provincial governor. This was because Yi Xian was a genius, a monstrous genius that was hard to find in 10,000 years. Even a high-level divine king expert could not arouse suspicion. If he encountered Yi Xian, he would not be able to defeat him. Of course, they did not know that Yi Xian had paid a heavy price for this outburst. The Divine Wing's energy had been completely depleted this time. It would be a long time before they could be used again. Next, Yi Xian had to consider how to continue the battle. Eternal points were too difficult to obtain. Yi Xian could not bear to use them. It seems that I can only use divine talismans and restrictions. I hope these will have some effect on him. Yi Xian said in his heart. At the same time, he ordered the system to start refining restrictions and divine talismans. This time, Yi Xian only had one request. The greater the power, the better. The stronger the attack, the better. However, even if the system were to refine the restriction, it would still take time. Therefore, Yi Xian could only rely on himself to buy as much time as possible. Human! I want you dead! I want you dead! At this time, the seventh prince had already sunk into extreme anger. His body was now condensed to a mere dozen meters in size. After all, he was from the Kuan Pang clan. What the rock race was most proud of was their enormous size. And now, the seventh prince was only a dozen meters tall. If he was placed in the race, Even a newborn baby would be a dozen times bigger than him. How could he accept this? More importantly, he would never have the chance to grow in size in the future because he had already forcefully used the 62 transformations. Die! Suddenly, the 70,000 character mouth spat out a huge beam of light. Unlike Yi Xian's Fury of the Gods, Yi Xian's attack was constantly spreading out, while the 7th Prince's attack was condensed and didn't dissipate. Boom! The attack was extremely fast. Yi Xian didn't even have the time to use it before he was hit directly. In mid-air, Yi Xian's blood sprayed like rain as he was blasted into the ground. Boom! A huge crater with a radius of 1,000 miles and a depth of 100 meters appeared. This attack left many people on tenterhooks. This was because many people were wondering if Yi Xian would be killed by this attack. However, a figure quickly soared into the sky again. That figure was a bloody mess. At this time, he didn't look like a person at all. He was just a lump of flesh. It was obvious how strong the 7th Prince's attack was. However, people didn't even have time to be surprised by Yi Xian's wretched state before they were shocked by Yi Xian's terrifying recovery ability. When Yi Xian flew up, he was still a lump of flesh. However, when he stood in front of the 7th Prince again, he had already recovered to his original state. It was as if he hadn't been injured at all. The Eternal Body's recovery ability was no joke. At the very least, external injuries couldn't be seen at all. Of course, Yi Xian wasn't completely unaffected. In fact, he was still greatly affected. However, these were all internal injuries that couldn't be seen. Damn you, human! Go to hell! Boom! Another pillar of light, one that was even more powerful than the previous one, struck Yi Xian once again. Yi Xian was extremely vexed. In fact, he had already noticed it. However, the 7th Prince's attack was too fast. By the time Yi Xian realized it, he had already been hit. This speed was faster than Yi Xian's spiritual will reaction speed. Boom! In a radius of 10,000 miles, the heavens collapsed and the earth cracked. Countless rocks flew and countless mountains collapsed. Some of the true Immortal Realm and Mystic God Realm ordinary disciples who were too close to Yi Xian's landing were actually killed by the aftershock of Yi Xian's landing. Walala! Countless canyons were left behind on the ground. There was even magma that spewed out. Everyone's attention was focused on where Yi Xian had landed. Whether it was those from the Kunlun Divine Domain or those from the Demon Divine Domain, they were all extremely shocked. They didn't know what the outcome would be. This time, would Yi Xian fly out like the previous time? Or could it be that this time, Yi Xian would be directly defeated? Quick look! What's that? Suddenly, someone exclaimed in shock. Following that, everyone saw another bloody figure shoot up into the sky. Moreover, just like the previous time, his body was rapidly recovering. How was this possible? Everyone from the Demon Divine Domain was extremely shocked. Every one of them had the ability to recover. However, this was like Yi Xian's strong recovery ability. They had never even seen it before, much less possessed it. How could he have such strong recovery ability? He was simply a monster. And the one who was most shocked was the 7th Prince. Only he knew the power of his own attack best. Although it looked like two simple light beam attacks, they were in fact the Kuan Peng tribe's innate attack technique. They were so strong that they could kill enemies above their level. But now, he was facing someone whose cultivation was lower than his. Furthermore, he didn't use any defensive treasures or mystiques. He was actually able to withstand it with just his physical body. Was this mystique really the Kuan Peng tribe's strongest attack mystique? Why did it give off such a weak feeling? The 7th Prince couldn't help but start to doubt his own life and his own tribe. Why aren't you dead yet? This is impossible. I'll definitely kill you. The 7th Prince saw Yi Xian standing in front of him again and shouted furiously. He was about to launch another attack. At this time, Yi Xian's expression changed drastically. You damned brat. How dare you make me feel so much pain? It seems like there's no need for me to keep you alive. I was going to keep you alive in exchange for some resources from the Demon Divine Domain, but it seems like there's no need for that. This time, I'll kill you with my own hands and devour your body. Wei Zhentian, kill him. Wei Zhentian moved again, but this was just the beginning. 6-syllable mantra. Compound. It was the 6-syllable mantra. Compound word mantra. The mystique that required countless resources to use. Re-1R. Chapter 2360. Of course, Yi Xian had the right to use it now. 135-7924? 6810 GGGGGD on the battlefield, be it those from the Demon God domain or the Kunlun God domain, it was impossible for them to bring much resources with them. But Yi Xian had devoured millions of corpses and obtained countless Qian Kuan rings. He could still scrape together enough resources to use a mirror image mystique. In an instant, an identical seventh prince appeared on the battlefield. Everyone was stunned. They did not know what trick Yi Xian had used to summon another seventh prince. Clearly, it was summoned by Yi Xian. Kill him. At Yi Xian's command, the mirror image charged towards the seventh prince. But was this the end? No, how could that be? How could Yi Xian only have so few tricks up his sleeve? Was Yi Xian really unprepared after being injured by this guy twice? Was he really going to take the beating for nothing? No, of course not. Yi Xian's goal from the start was to buy time for the system to create seals and talismans. And now, it was time to reap the rewards. Yi Xian waved his hand, and countless seals and talismans appeared beside Yi Xian. Then they charged towards the seventh prince. Seal Talisman Formation. Yes. It was a special formation made of seals and talismans. A trick that normal people would not even dare to think about. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. It was as though the sky had been lit up. A circular formation trapped the seventh prince. The periphery of the formation was a super defense made of countless seals, while the interior of the formation was a super attack made of countless talismans. Of course, it was not just an attack, but also a support technique. It could provide support to the mirror image summoned by the 6 syllables mantra. At the same time, it could weaken the real seventh prince's attributes. This was the terrifying talisman seal formation. A super existence that only Yi Xian dared to use casually. After doing all this, Yi Xian pulled out his rule bow. This seal talisman seal formation could attack from the outside, but the inside could not do anything to the outside. Therefore, Yi Xian wanted to let the seventh prince have a taste of what it meant to be hurt. Rule of Devouring Arrow. Yi Xian did not hold back. This time, he did not have to worry about accidentally injuring anyone. After all, there was only one enemy in the seal talisman formation, and that was the seventh prince. Therefore, no matter what attack Yi Xian used, there would be no accidental injuries. Under the control of Wei Zhentian, the god-slaying swords, the seventh prince's weakness. Mirror image could withstand all of seventh prince's attacks, and could even counterattack with attack. Therefore, the seventh prince was in a hopeless situation. It was not a predicament, but a hopeless situation. The mirror image suddenly slammed into the seventh prince's huge body. You're not afraid of the power of laws, right? Then, are you afraid of physical attacks? Before the seventh prince could react, he found Wei Zhentian and launched a surprise attack without hesitation. With a swoosh, the sword left a bloody wound on the seventh prince's body. The sharpness of the god-slaying swords was enough to injure the seventh prince. At the same time, Yi Xian's devouring arrow flew out. Although the seventh prince would not be hurt by the rule of devouring, the new gravity of the devouring arrow was enough to affect him. And this effect was to immobilize him. The seventh prince continued to roar in anger and struggle. Unfortunately, this was a battle in the divine dominion. This was a one-on-one battle. This was a one-on-one battle between the commanders of 2 armies. Therefore, no one dared to step forward to help. Tens of millions of people from both sides watched the battle between Yi Xian and the seventh prince in silence. No, this was no longer a battle, but a humiliation. Yi Xian was coming up with ways to humiliate the seventh prince. At this moment, the seventh prince was completely defenseless against Yi Xian's multiple attacks. Didn't you have a good time hitting me just now? Come on, continue hitting me. Where's your light beam? Come on, attack me. Yi Xian shot another arrow, trapping the seventh prince in place. 2 god-slaying swords quickly left 2 bloody wounds on his body. Then, another divine talisman exploded beside the seventh prince, propelling his body forward. In front of him, the mirror image was already waiting. When it saw the seventh prince approaching, it whipped its tail. Human, go to hell. The seventh prince condensed another pillar of light and directly attacked in Yi Xian's direction. However, this attention was blocked by the restriction talisman array. Then, it kept bouncing back in the array. In the end, it actually returned to the 7th prince. The 7th prince had no choice but to stop his attack because his attack was basically hitting himself. The corners of Yi Xian's mouth curled up slightly as he watched the 7th prince struggle. So, this guy only had this little trick up his sleeve. Then he could go die. Wei Zhantian, kill him for me. Suddenly, Yi Xian roared. At the same time, he shot out several arrows. Each arrow was infused with the divine talisman law of support divine talismans. Sharp. Critical hit. Strengthen. Penetrate. Break. Several divine talismans were infused into the 2 god-slaying swords. Then the 2 god-slaying swords charged forward. 4 holes appeared on the 7th prince's body. Rit turned out that the 2 swords had pierced through the 7th prince's body. However, this was just the beginning. Under Yi Xian's command, Wei Zhantian controlled the 2 god-slaying swords and shuttled back and forth, leaving holes in the 70,000 word figure's body. In an instant, the 7th prince's body was covered in blood. The mirror image was not idle either. It kept attacking, biting, and whipping its tail. All of them were physical attacks. Do you think you can do anything to me like this? No, I am the great Kuan-Peng tribe. You can't do anything to me. The 7th prince was covered in blood, but he was still shouting. Following the 7th prince's words, countless halos appeared around him. These halos were like the support divine talismans that Yi Xian had used. They could enhance all kinds of support statuses. Yi Xian frowned. Could it be that the only way to deal with this guy was to use the Eternal Zone? Suddenly, the system notification sounded. Ding! Ancient Demon God's blessing detected. Ding! System notification. The host's purple blood ability has been activated. Ding! Purple blood is the blood of the ancient demon god. The host can use the purple blood to break any ancient demon god's blessing. At the same time, the host can use special methods to enhance himself with the purple blood. Chapter 2361. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation wasn't the purple blood that Yi Xian had obtained from the mysterious lake? Besides the purple blood, Yi Xian also had the golden blood. Of course, Yi Xian had only found one way to use the purple blood. But even so, it was enough. Since he knew that the purple blood could break the ancient Fey god's blessing, what was Yi Xian waiting for? System, use the purple blood to break that guy's blessing. Ding! System notification. Host has successfully used the purple blood's special ability. In an instant, Yi Xian waved his hand and 3 drops of purple blood flew directly towards the 7th prince. Present. Super devouring system. Countless doubts lingered in Yi Xian's heart. However, Yi Xian had no way of answering these questions, because Yi Xian himself didn't know what was going on. Re-1R. What should we do next? Finally, a powerhouse reacted and asked Yi Xian. In everyone's eyes, the reason why they were able to defeat the enemy this time was because of this Divine Lord Region Commander. At this moment, no one dared to underestimate Yi Xian because of his low cultivation level. Chapter 2362. This was a scene that these people would never forget for the rest of their lives. 135-7924? 6810 GGGGGD. Not to mention the people of the Jiufeng 60,000 territories. Even the high and mighty Divine Palace Imperial Guards looked at Yi Xian in a different light. At the beginning, people were only respectful to Yi Xian because he was the Jiufeng provincial governor and a law enforcer of the Divine Territory. But now, people had started to acknowledge Yi Xian's strength. Those endless methods, those incomparably powerful methods, caused people to be unable to help but wonder how strong Yi Xian's combat strength was. Some people said that Yi Xian had the fighting strength of a mid-level Divine King, while others said that Yi Xian could defeat a high-level Divine King. However, people were very clear that Yi Xian was only a peak high-level Divine Lord. Strange methods, strange magical treasures, and strange abilities. Yi Xian was filled with endless mysteries. Yi Xian looked at the battlefield and with a wave of his hand, he devoured all the high-level corpses that he could. Cleaning up the battlefield was the full strength of the victor. Yi Xian was no longer alone, so he couldn't take all the corpses for himself. After all, these corpses were actually a fortune in the eyes of the various factions. All right, leave some people to clean up the battlefield. The rest of you, return to your positions and wait for my call. Yi Xian said casually.
Yes, Lord Provincial Governor.
My lord, although the Tianhua Divine Sect isn't considered a big sect, we occupy a good location. Why don't you set up the palace in the Tianhua Divine Sect? The Tianhua Divine Sect is willing to contribute to the sect. If they didn't flatter him now, when would they? Lu Hanzhan didn't hesitate and stepped forward. Yes, my lord. You need a provincial governor palace now. With the start of the Divine Territory War, there will be more and more battles in the future. Moreover, it's very likely that the Divine Master will let the provincial governor personally lead people into the Master God battlefield. The Lin family is willing to contribute resources to build a provincial governor palace for my lord. Another person stood out to show his loyalty. Yi Xian actually knew why they were doing this. Because Yi Xian now had power in his hands. Once his regional commander palace was built, it was inevitable that he would need to select a large number of officials. These people were all eagerly looking at Yi Xian, hoping that he would be given an official position. Within the military strength system, the soldiers that were produced possessed the strength of laws. In other words, the lowest level was at the low first-grade Divine Lord realm. As for producing low-level first-grade Divine Lord soldiers, each day, the military force subsystem could only produce 100. Of course, they could also use resources to exchange for them. 100 low-level first-grade Divine Lord realm soldiers seemed to be quite a bit. But this was the Divine Realm's war stage. What use could 100 soldiers have? Perhaps before becoming a law envoy of the realm of the gods, if Yi Xian knew that he could summon 100 incomparably loyal Divine Lords as his subordinates in a single day, he probably would have been incomparably happy. Unfortunately, their statuses were different, so their horizons were naturally different. Chapter 2363. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation, Ding. System Notification. Please take note. Host. The military subsystem can be upgraded using conviction points and other special methods. The system notification said, upgrade conviction points? However, Yi Xian did not even bother to check. He knew that the amount of conviction points required would be terrifying. However, since he could use conviction points to upgrade the military subsystem, he could also use conviction points to exchange for soldiers. In that case, this could be considered as a way to urge Yi Xian to complete the mission of rebuilding conviction points. 135-7924? 6810 GGGGGD. Of course, Yi Xian had never relaxed. He had always been serious about completing the mission. Since he could not count on the military subsystem, Yi Xian might as well set up the sect first. Yi Xian had obtained a sect card. Now was the time to set up the sect. After all, Yi Xian had wanted to use this sect as his temporary provincial commander palace from the start. 2614. http://www.banfushing.com/read/14311/6907938. HTML. If the chapter display is incomplete, please wait a few seconds or refresh. Chapter 2364. Hearing this, Yi Xian asked curiously, what conditions? Qi Song looked into the distance and slowly said, do not let the White Dragon Palace obtain it. Although he didn't understand why, Yi Xian replied solemnly, this junior will definitely complete it. All right. Qi Song nodded in satisfaction and continued, as far as I know, the White Dragon Palace has recently refined something called the Purification Pool. It can purify the World Annihilation Dragon Scales and allow them to be absorbed by the White Dragons. I estimate that the current strength of the White Dragon Palace has already surpassed that of our Four Directions Pavilion and the Thousand Mountains sect. Just now, Chen Xian died at the hands of the Wind, Thunder, Rain, and Lightning Generals. When the news reaches the White Dragon Palace, they will definitely take action. Then what should we do? Yi Xian frowned. Although the Four Directions Pavilion and the remnants of the Black Dragon sect are not as strong as the White Dragon Palace, they are not to be trifled with. After Qi Song finished speaking, he called someone over and had him arrange a residence for Yi Xian. After that, Yi Xian stayed in the Four Directions Pavilion. Indeed, within a few days, the people from the White Dragon Palace came looking for him. Qi Song, come out. An explosive shout resounded in the sky above the Four Directions Pavilion. Chapter 2365. That's exactly what I was thinking. Qi Song nodded and said, However, the White Dragon Palace still has an old fellow, Cui Ming. He is the alliance leader of the Dragon Slaying Alliance.
I wonder if he has broken through to the 4th rank of saint.
A 4th rank saint was one realm higher than him. Coupled with the physique of a demon cultivator, even with the 10,000 beast diagram, Qi Song might not be able to defeat the other party. Then, why don't we wait for a while? Yi Xian narrowed his eyes. Right now, he was at the true sovereign realm. As long as he broke through again, a 4th rank saint would not be a problem. Alright, I also need to organize some people. Qi Song nodded. However, now that the White Dragon Palace's palace master was dead, the White Dragon Palace's life jade pendant shattered. The White Dragon Palace would probably make a big move next. Yi Xian didn't care about that and continued to cultivate. During this time, people from the 4 pavilions would occasionally come to report on the situation of the White Dragon Palace. What people could not understand was that the White Dragon Palace's palace master had died, but the White Dragon Palace did not come looking for them. It was very strange that they were calm and peaceful.
Could it be that they were afraid that there were experts in the 4 pavilions, or that the old man was in seclusion and no one was in charge?
Ding! Host has broken through. Current level: 6th grade True Sovereign. Ding! Ghost Lord Yan Ming, World Annihilation Ghost Dragon, Wei Zhentian, and Heaven-Breaking Divine Ape have broken through. Current level: 1st grade Half-Step True Emperor. More than 10 days later, the World Annihilation Ghost Dragon finally broke through to Half-Step True Emperor. Right now, if Yi Xian were to fuse with the World Annihilation Ghost Dragon and go all out, his strength should have already reached the saint level, right? If that was the case, he could go to the White Dragon Palace alone to provoke them. The Hall Master of the White Dragon Palace has been dead for so long, but the White Dragon Palace still hasn't made any moves. Why don't we take the initiative to attack? Yi Xian thought. If he were to join forces with the 4 pavilions, then the spoils would have to be divided among the 4 pavilions, so he might as well act alone. Let's go! Without saying anything further, Yi Xian directly tore through the void and left. Long ago, Old Shu had already left the 4 pavilions, and Yi Xian had also left before locating them in the void. Now, he had directly left the 4 pavilions, and he was even under the protection of so many people. White Dragon Palace, I'm coming! Yi Xian's eyes narrowed slightly as he recalled the last wishes of the Supreme Dragon Soul. Destroy the White Dragon Palace. After a few teleportations in the city, Yi Xian finally arrived at the territory of the White Dragon Palace. Fortunately, he had the highest grade pearl of concealment in his body. Otherwise, he would have been discovered by the White Dragon Palace. Flowing Light Invisibility Cloak. Yi Xian concealed himself and headed towards the White Dragon Palace. After a while, he stood outside the White Dragon Palace and felt the powerful auras inside. This White Dragon Palace was much stronger than the Black Dragon sect. Even though they had lost a Hall Master and 4 first-grade saints, they were still as powerful as ever. Today, I'll give you an appetizer. The corners of Yi Xian's mouth curled up slightly. He directly merged together and charged in. The appearance of this aura immediately alarmed the experts in the White Dragon Palace. Yi Xian's target was also these saint-level experts. He didn't wait for them to react before opening his mouth. World Annihilation Roar. Boom. The power of this attack wasn't any weaker than Qi Song's Wind Lightning Claw. With just a single strike, it pierced through the heart of a saint from the White Dragon Hall. Dang. Ding. The host's killing intent has increased. A system notification sounded out in Yi Xian's mind. This wasn't the end. Immortal Slaughter Puppet. Immortal Extinguishing Arrow. Yi Xian's continuous summoning instantly increased his strength by quite a bit. At the same time, the experts from the White Dragon Palace also charged out. Unfortunately, Yi Xian's current strength wasn't weak. He could even fight against a 3rd-grade saint, let alone them. World Annihilation Roar. Yi Xian didn't care about them and continued to attack. One by one, the corpses of the saints fell from the sky. Impudent! Suddenly, a powerful aura spread out. This aura caused Yi Xian's heart to palpitate. Rank 4 Saint? The old fellow from the White Dragon Hall had come out. Today is the day that the World Annihilation Ghost Dragon is about to unleash its world-destroying might. I'll use you guys as an example. Yi Xian glared and directly used the Assassination Eye to flash to the center of the White Dragon Hall. Then, World annihilation divine might. Boom! A dazzling black light bloomed, and nearly half of the White Dragon Hall was instantly enveloped. Although the World Annihilation Ghost Dragon's current cultivation level was low, it had so many enhancements, as well as the state of slaughter. The power this time was probably no weaker than what the Black Destruction Dragon had unleashed in the past. Boom! In the blink of an eye, countless people in the White Dragon Hall were blasted into smithereens, and a huge hole appeared in the entire White Dragon Hall. Not only that, but even quite a few saints had died. Almost all the first-rank saints that got close were annihilated, and the second-rank saints suffered heavy casualties. However, the old hall master of the White Dragon Hall, Chui Ming, was completely unharmed. Is this the explosion of the World Annihilation imprint? Chui Ming immediately recognized it. After all, he was the alliance leader of the Dragon-Slaying Alliance back then. What a guy, he has some strength. Yi Xian noticed him as well and thought to himself. Right now, his priority was to destroy the White Dragon Hall because he didn't lack money. The things in the space were enough for him to break through 10 or 20 times. If he waited until he broke through, he wouldn't be interested in the things in the White Dragon Hall. Old man, let's fight, Yi Xian said to Chui Ming. Junior, you're courting death. Chui Ming was furious. After all, Yi Xian actually dared to charge into the White Dragon Hall and activate the World Extermination imprint. That attack just now had killed over 100,000 White Dragon Hall disciples, including his clan. How could he not take revenge? Swish! Chui Ming immediately charged towards Yi Xian, but he didn't transform into his original body. Yi Xian quickly used the Death Pursuit token to mark Chui Ming, then controlled the Immortal Slaughter Puppet and the Immortal Extinguishing Arrow to greet Chui Ming. At the same time, his original body opened its mouth wide and spat out a mouthful of blood. World Annihilation Roar. The power of the World Annihilation Roar that had fused with the World Annihilation imprint was astonishing. However, with Chui Ming's cultivation and strength, it wouldn't be that easy to kill him. Purifying Sacred Dragon Light. Facing this attack, Chui Ming punched out, directly colliding with the World Annihilation Roar. Although he hadn't transformed into his original body yet, he could use the holy energy in his body at any time. This strike had actually dispersed the World Annihilation Roar. It wasn't hard to imagine that if his main body had used the purifying sacred dragon light, he would have been able to directly attack Yi Xian. However, Chui Ming was afraid that if he killed Yi Xian in a single strike, wouldn't the World Annihilation imprint be gone? This old fellow is indeed powerful. Even if I use all my firepower, it would still be difficult for me to be his match. I wonder if I can force him to reveal his true body. Yi Xian's expression was gloomy as he thought to himself. He didn't care too much and directly went forward to meet him. At the same time, he activated a formation. Immortal Slaying Sword Formation. Chapter 2366. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. The attire of the guards of the Deity Palace was not something that anyone could imitate. The guards of the Deity Palace symbolized Mi Su's authority. And there was not a single person in the Kunlun Divine region who was unaware of this phenomenon. Being a guard of the Deity Palace was not only an honor, but also a symbol of status and authority. No one had ever dared to impersonate a god of the Deity Palace. After all, they were the gods of the Deity Palace. The crime of impersonating them was not as simple as being executed and exterminated. Furthermore, it was impossible to impersonate them. Every guard of the Deity Palace had their own identity badge and unique set of treasures. When the 100 guards of the Deity Palace appeared, the people of the Lu family were all stunned. These people were not people that the Lu family could afford to offend. Even a single guard of the Deity Palace had the power to exterminate the Lu family thousands of times. Not to mention, there were 100 of them. With the guards of the Deity Palace as his followers, Yi Xian's identity was obvious. 135-7924? 6810 GGGGGD. The Provincial Governor. The Provincial Governor of the 9 Directions' 60,000 territories. This was a man with unparalleled authority even in the Kunlun Divine Domain. Yet, he had appeared in such a small place. The young master of the Lu family was completely scared out of his wits. He kept kowtowing on the ground. As for the guards around him, they didn't even have the heart to resist. At this point, they couldn't even decide how they were going to die, let alone talk about anything else. Resist? A mere Lu family rebelling against the provincial governor? Wasn't that a joke?
Lord Provincial Governor, please spare my life.
This lowly one had eyes but failed to recognize Mount Tai. Please spare this lowly one.
This lowly one will not dare to do it again.
This lowly one will not dare to do it again.
It's all his fault.
Yes, it's him. It's all Lu Lauer's fault. This lowly one really did not know anything. The young master wanted to push the blame to Lu Lauer in hopes of living. Unfortunately, Lu Lauer was already scared out of his wits. He didn't look like the mastermind at all. Yi Xian didn't even bother to deal with these people.
He directly said to a guard of the Divine Palace, "I'll leave the matter here to you."
Attacking a military commander and disobeying a military order, I'm sure you know what to do. But I don't want to make a big deal out of this, so I'll leave it to you.
Yes, sir. The guard of the Divine Palace answered.
To the guards of the Divine Palace, Yi Xian was actually their only backer. According to the rules set by Mi Yan, once they were assigned to be Yi Xian's personal guards, all future transfers would have to go through Yi Xian. In other words, Yi Xian was their only superior. Mi's management of the Kunlun Divine Realm was based on a system of enfeoffment. For example, Yi Xian was a military commander. Yi Xian himself was completely under Mi Yan's command. Mi Yan had the right to decide anything Yi Xian did. However, Yi Xian's subordinates could disobey Mi Yan's orders. This was because Yi Xian's subordinates only obeyed Yi Xian. Even on the battlefield of the sovereigns, every military commander's troops only obeyed their military commander. No one else had the right to interfere. Of course, the prerequisite was that you had to have the guts to disobey Mi Yan. But at least, in terms of rules, Yi Xian's subordinates really only obeyed Yi Xian. Therefore, from the moment these 100 Divine Palace Guards were assigned to Yi Xian, regardless of whether they were willing or not, they could only be loyal to Yi Xian. Even if they used the power of their families to help Yi Xian, it would be normal. Yi Xian didn't care much about small fries like the Lu family. What he cared about now was the destruction of the sect and Go Zheng's father. If he wanted to fully understand the situation in the first secret realm, he would have to find Go Zheng's father. That would be the best choice. Of course, before that, Yi Xian still wanted to take a look at the first secret realm. He wanted to see what the realm of death was. According to Go Zheng, there were special divine beasts in this secret realm. However, Yi Xian didn't know what was so special about these divine beasts. Wait for me outside. I'm going to take a look at the first secret realm. Yi Xian turned around and ordered the Divine Palace Guards. Lord Military Commander, let us follow you. After all, the realm of death is filled with endless dangers. With us around, we can help you if you encounter any danger. A Divine Palace Guard stepped forward and said respectfully to Yi Xian. Yi Xian smiled slightly. He knew that the Divine Palace Guard meant well. However, in fact, they would be a burden if Yi Xian brought them along. Perhaps if he really encountered some danger, Yi Xian wouldn't be able to defeat the enemy. However, it wouldn't be too difficult for him to escape. No need. I know that you mean well. However, don't forget that I'm a restriction master. Therefore, if I encounter any danger, I will naturally retreat immediately. If you follow me, it will be more troublesome. Yi Xian didn't care and directly expressed his doubts. Fortunately, the Divine Palace Guards knew that Yi Xian was telling the truth, so they didn't care about Yi Xian's words. Soon, Yi Xian walked directly into the portal in mid-air. It was different from ordinary portals. When Yi Xian walked into the portal, he clearly felt a huge pulling force. It even made Yi Xian feel very uncomfortable. Moreover, this pulling force lasted for a long time. It only stopped when a dark light appeared in front of Yi Xian's eyes. This was an extremely special world. What appeared in front of Yi Xian was a corridor. However, this corridor was hundreds of miles wide and had a special transformation. Behind Yi Xian, the portal that sent him in floated there quietly. Obviously, this was the only way to leave. Here, Yi Xian's first feeling was a special aura of nomological laws. System, I feel a very special aura of nomological laws. This is something I have never felt before. What's going on? Ding. System notification. Scanning and detecting. Analyzing data. Ding. Analysis complete. Ding. Detected that the host is in a special space, the Middle Ages fault. What did the Middle Ages fault mean?
Yi Xian was a little puzzled, so he continued to ask the system, "System, what is the Middle Ages' fault?"
Ding. System notification.
The Middle Ages is equivalent to a special transition period after the end of the Ancient Age. It lasts for only 50,000 years. However, because of the Great War in the Ancient Age, the nomological laws of the realm of the gods were in chaos. Therefore, during the Middle Ages, the aura of the nomological laws was rather chaotic. Moreover, the chaos law appeared in large quantities.
Chaos law?
Although Yi Xian didn't know much about the chaos law, he wasn't unfamiliar with it either. However, the chaos law that the system was talking about now seemed a little different. As expected, just as Yi Xian was puzzled, the system continued to speak. Chapter 2367. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation, Ding. The primal chaos laws of the Middle Ages is a temporary restoration law of nature created in response to the Middle Ages. It cannot be understood or controlled. Its only use is to adjust and restore other laws. Ding. System notification. Please take note that the host is currently in a special space belonging to the Middle Ages that is currently being restored. There will be some special opportunities within. It is recommended that the host explore on his own. 135-7924? 6810 GGGGGD, explore on his own? But why was there no random mission this time? Every random mission could bring Yi Xian unexpected benefits. However, Yi Xian had discovered this special area from the Middle Ages and had not triggered any random missions. This made Yi Xian feel a little uncomfortable. However, it was not up to Yi Xian to decide whether to issue a random mission. Hence, Yi Xian had no choice but to accept it. This was the first time Yi Xian had encountered a Middle Ages secret realm. Furthermore, the system had said that if he explored, he would definitely find some special opportunities. Unfortunately, this secret realm was not completely open. In fact, Yi Xian had only advanced for an hour before he reached the limit. In front of Yi Xian was an incomparably enormous black ball. One could vaguely see through some cracks that the interior of the black ball was actually a floating piece of land. There seemed to be a palace-like existence on the land, but the black ball couldn't pass through at all. This was because it was completely constructed from the primal chaos laws. It was as if the primal chaos laws were protecting or restoring the world within. Apart from that, there were also the divine beasts guarding the area. Yi Xian finally understood why Guo Zhang had said that the divine beasts here were unique to the first secret realm. This was because the divine beasts here were divine beasts of the primal chaos laws. Divine beasts of the primal chaos laws were much more difficult to deal with than any other divine beasts. These divine beasts could not be killed because they had the aura of the primal chaos laws. However, most of the primal chaos laws did not contain the aura of the primal chaos laws. Re-1 Ronly Some extremely special primal chaos laws contain divine beasts of the primal chaos laws. For example, the special divine beasts of the law of chaos in front of Yi Xian. Because these law divine beasts were nurtured by the law of chaos of the Middle Ages, they only had one mission, and that was to find possible loopholes in the law of chaos, void cracks and so on. Then, they would swallow them in one gulp and slowly digest them in their stomach. Their digestion process was actually a process of recovery. The law divine beasts here were all law divine beasts working hard to repair this space. For a moment, Yi Xian was unwilling to continue. This was because he did not want to disturb these law divine beasts who had been working for who knew how many years. Even though these law divine beasts clearly saw Yi Xian, because Yi Xian did not have any law loopholes, they did not pay any attention to Yi Xian. Even if Yi Xian walked to their side, they would not even look at Yi Xian. It could be said that these divine beasts were the most adorable divine beasts Yi Xian had encountered since he entered the god realm. Unfortunately, the law of chaos of the Middle Ages could not be controlled, so Yi Xian's forceful devouring was useless. Just as Yi Xian was admiring these divine beasts of the law of primal chaos, a divine sense suddenly shot out from the black ball. Although it was only for a short moment, it was captured by the law of primal chaos and quickly dispersed. However, Yi Xian sensed it. It's actually them. At this moment, Yi Xian was beyond shocked. This was because he had discovered a shocking secret, a possibility that Yi Xian had not even considered. Annihilation's headquarters. Annihilation's headquarters was actually inside that black sphere. Of course, it was not the current headquarters of Annihilation, but the headquarters of the Annihilation organization that had instigated the Great War of the Gods in ancient times. Even though this was just a fragment of Annihilation's headquarters, Yi Xian still felt a sense of horror. What kind of existence was the Annihilation Organization? Why? Everything from the ancient times had disappeared, but there was still a fragment of the Annihilation Organization's headquarters, and it was actually hiding here. It was no wonder that Annihilation wanted to know the secret of this place. Once they knew the secret of this place, they would probably do everything in their power to enter this place. Although Yi Xian felt that Annihilation did not have the ability to destroy the law of chaos of the Middle Ages, it was better to be safe than sorry. It looked like Yi Xian had no choice this time. He had to build his sect here. Moreover, he had to protect this first mystery realm as a key location. Yi Xian was well aware of the dangers of Annihilation. However, Yi Xian did not expect that he would unwittingly discover the headquarters of the Annihilation Organization that had almost destroyed the realm of the gods. Yi Xian knew very well that once he sealed off this place, he would only be met with a frenzied and unorganized attack. However, Yi Xian had no other choice. If he had not discovered it, that would have been a different matter. However, it seemed that the will of the heavens was guiding all of this. Since Yi Xian had discovered this place, he could not just leave it be. Let's go. Let's go. Yi Xian directly turned around and walked out of the first secret realm. Just as Yi Xian had expected, the Annihilation Organization had indeed arranged for spies here. In fact, the Annihilation Organization had only discovered this first secret realm more than 10 years ago. Moreover, they had only sensed a trace of abnormality. They were not as lucky as Yi Xian. They had actually sensed the explosion of divine consciousness from the Black Sphere. They had only seen the buildings inside the Black Sphere and were suspicious. If Annihilation had found out that this was the headquarters of the ancient Annihilation Organization, not only would Annihilation from the Kunlun God domain set their sights on this place, but all the Annihilation organizations in the realm of the gods would gather here. The moment Yi Xian came out, he did not hesitate. He immediately ordered the system. System, this is the place. I want to build my sect here. Use the special order. The special order allowed Yi Xian to quickly build some special buildings. Moreover, the system's products must be of the highest quality. Ding! The host has used the special order. Confirm? Confirm. Following Yi Xian's order, palaces appeared out of thin air. In the sky, mysterious rays of light danced around. As the rays of light continued to condense, palaces rose from the ground. With Yi Xian as the center line, the sky, the earth, everything was suddenly undergoing a huge change. Even his divine power was rapidly converging towards this spot. Even those outside the Thousand Realms could clearly feel the abnormal fluctuations of divine power. Countless divine powers were actually gathering in one direction. Some of the elites could not help but look in that direction. When they saw the sacred palace guards guarding the surroundings, how could they not know that Yi Xian was building a new palace? It was the Provincial Commander Palace. Chapter 2368. Since that's the case, then I'll do it myself. The voice of the middle-aged man with horns sounded. Yi Xian coldly snorted in his heart. Go ahead and do it. I have the time reversal skill anyway. Am I afraid of you? The reason he didn't use it was because he wanted to see what the middle-aged man with horns would say. After all, he might know the origins of the heaven-breaking divine ape. However, in the next moment, Yi Xian's expression froze. 2 rays of black light flashed and entered Yi Xian and the World Annihilation Ghost Dragon's bodies. Immediately afterwards, Yi Xian heard 2 system notifications. Ding! The World Annihilation Ghost Dragon has forcefully terminated the contract with the host. Ding! The host has triggered a random quest to re-establish a contract with the World Annihilation Ghost Dragon. This middle-aged man with horns was actually powerful enough to forcefully remove the contract between Yi Xian and the World Annihilation Ghost Dragon. This wasn't the main point. The main point was that when Yi Xian heard the notification, he subconsciously glanced back in time. F***ck, I can't use it? This time it was a tragedy. F***ck, this happened the last time I killed Jiang Tai in the Blood Flame Hall, and now it's happening again? Yi Xian's eyes widened as he cursed the middle-aged man with horns 1,000 times in his heart. If he couldn't use the time reversal skill, then he wouldn't be able to return to the past. This way, the World Annihilation Ghost Dragon's contract would be forcefully terminated. Before Yi Xian could speak, the World Annihilation Ghost Dragon rapidly shrank with a dragon's roar and was put into a bag by the middle-aged man with horns. The World Annihilation Ghost Dragon had disappeared. "What are you doing? Give it back!" Yi Xian shouted. "Brat, don't refuse a toast and drink a forfeit. I took him away for your own good. Do you know what will happen to you if some people meet it in the future?" After the middle-aged man with horns finished coldly snorting, he turned his attention to the heaven-breaking divine ape and said, "This little monkey, it's best to be careful when it appears in the future, lest it attracts a fatal disaster. Death calamity. Kill your grandma." Yi Xian cursed again. Their ancestors were all palace masters of the 12 Divine Beast Palace, but they were all sealed. The reason I took away the World Annihilation Demon Dragon was to remove the seal on its ancestor, the middle-aged man with horns said. However, this time, he used a sound transmission. "Then why did you only take it away?" Yi Xian couldn't help but ask. "That stinky monkey from the Divine Monkey Palace doesn't have a good relationship with me. Why should I help it remove the seal?" The middle-aged man with horns snorted. "If you want to, go to the Immortal Treasure Mountain yourself. If you can help that stinky monkey escape, you will naturally be able to find me." After he finished speaking, his figure disappeared, not even giving Yi Xian a chance to reply. F***CK. Yi Xian gritted his teeth and cursed. He remembered the names of the middle-aged man's words. 12 Divine Beast Palace, Immortal Treasure Mountain, Divine Monkey Palace, Demon Dragon Palace. However, at this moment, Yi Xian's expression suddenly changed. When the middle-aged man with horns appeared, he suppressed everyone, causing them to be unable to move. Now that he'd left and taken away the World Annihilation Ghost Dragon, with Yi Xian's current strength, he probably couldn't even defeat a first-grade saint. One had to know that the current Yi Xian was unable to use the time reversal skill. If his clone died, it would be miserable. However, when Yi Xian turned his head in shock, he discovered that Cui Ming had already died. Not only that, the disciples of the White Dragon Hall were all the same. They all died from the pressure. Yi Xian couldn't help but shiver because he knew that if he didn't have the relationship between the World Annihilation Ghost Dragon and the Heaven-Breaking Divine Ape, he probably would have died as well. "You have horns, right? When I find you, I'll definitely tear off those horns of yours." Yi Xian gritted his teeth as he spoke. Originally, he'd relied on the World Annihilation Ghost Dragon to possess such strength. Now that the World Annihilation Ghost Dragon's contract had been forcefully terminated, Yi Xian was unable to fuse with the World Annihilation Ghost Dragon, causing his strength to greatly decrease. Right now, he was a 7th-grade True Sovereign, while Old Shu and the Heaven-Breaking Divine Ape were 2nd-grade half-step True Emperors. At their current strength they were at most at the True Emperor level. They probably couldn't even defeat a half-saint. What a dog! Yi Xian cursed in his heart once again. Fortunately, the bull-horned middle-aged man still had a death hunt on him. With this death warrant, it was still possible for Yi Xian to track down the bull-horned middle-aged man. However, strength was still the key. After all, that bull-horned middle-aged man was definitely stronger than a great sage. "Whatever, damn it, I'll go back and go into seclusion." Yi Xian coldly snorted. After cleaning up the battlefield, he directly left the White Dragon Hall. The most important thing now was to break through and then investigate. Very quickly, Yi Xian returned to the Four Directions Pavilion and told Qi Song what had happened. Then, he asked Qi Song to help investigate the matter of the 12 Divine Beasts Palace. Could it be that the 12 Divine Beasts Palace is the 12 Zodiac? Mouse, ox, tiger, rabbit, dragon, snake, horse, sheep, monkey, chicken, dog and pig? When he returned to his residence, Yi Xian suddenly thought of this. The Demon Dragon Palace and the Divine Monkey Palace corresponded to a dragon and a monkey, and the bull-horned middle-aged man seemed to be a cow. Thinking about it this way, it really was possible. No matter what, increasing my strength is the most important thing. Yi Xian raised his brows and directly began to cultivate in seclusion. Ding! Host has broken through. Current rank 1 half-step True Emperor. Ding! Ghost Lord Yan Ming, Wei Zhentian, and Heaven-Breaking Divine Ape have broken through. Current rank 5 half-step True Emperor. Somewhere in the Four Directions Pavilion, Yi Xian opened his eyes. He couldn't help but sigh as he listened to the notification in his mind. In fact, his seclusion this time didn't have much effect. He was completely resting with his eyes closed.
However, Luo Luo and Black Horn relied on the large amount of heavenly and earthly treasures and the 1,000-year planting space to directly break through to the half-saint stage. Top-grade dragon scales were already useless to Yi Xian, but they were still useful to Black Horn. At this moment, Black Horn had actually transformed from a single-horned black python into a devouring black dragon. After his transformation, his devouring ability and combat strength had greatly increased. Unfortunately, he was a Zuyawist that signed a master-servant contract with Yi Xian, so he couldn't be considered Yi Xian's possession. He could only be considered a fighter. The strength of Luo Luo and Black Horn has already surpassed that of Old Shu and Patian. However, now that I have those undead creatures, their strength is still not weak. No, I don't have the World Annihilation Ghost Dragon anymore. I can't control those undead creatures at all. Yi Xian frowned as he thought to himself. At this moment, someone suddenly landed outside his courtyard and sent a sound transmission. Yi Xian, I have a beautiful eye for the matter you asked me to investigate. The one who came was the Four Pavilions Pavilion Master, Qi Song. Previously, because the Thousand Mountains Sect's team was annihilated by Yi Xian, the Thousand Mountains Sect was a group of dragons without a leader. Regarding this, Qi Song was extremely grateful to Yi Xian. Any clues? Yi Xian immediately opened the door and asked after hearing Qi Song's words. You asked me to send people to inquire about the 12 Divine Beasts Palace, the Demon Dragon Palace, the Divine Monkey Palace, and so on. However, someone has heard of a power called the Divine Monkey Palace. Qi Song replied. Chapter 2369. However, even if Yi Xian knew about this, what could he do? What could he do? After all, these factions had sent their troops according to the rules. 135, 7924? 6810 GGGGGD. Furthermore, Yi Xian couldn't possibly force them to send more troops. Before the regional envoy court meeting was held, Yi Xian first sought out Kuan Buyu and the others. After all, there were very few people Yi Xian could trust at the moment. As for the sect masters and leaders of the large factions, Yi Xian knew very well that although these people obeyed him on the surface, it was unknown how much they knew about him on the inside. Perhaps the only thing Yi Xian could count on now was the military force distribution system. Ever since Yi Xian had obtained the military force distribution system, he had been accumulating manpower. Although the manpower that could be exchanged from the devouring space was limited, at least it could provide Yi Xian with a lot of support in the early stages. At the moment, Yi Xian could already summon 1,000 first-grade superior Divine Lord soldiers. It could be said that this was a relatively strong force, but it wouldn't be of much use in the Battle of the Masters of Gods. Although using faith points to exchange for soldiers could solve this urgent situation, Yi Xian wouldn't do so. First of all, he didn't have that many faith points at the moment, and the amount of faith points needed to exchange for soldiers would be astronomical. Rather than exchange for soldiers, it would be better to keep the military force distribution system. So how should he solve his current predicament? Kuan Buyu looked at Yi Xian in disgust. He had always thought that he was a genius, but compared to Yi Xian, he felt so powerless. Yi Xian's cultivation speed had exceeded Kuan Buyu's expectations. It could be said that Kuan Buyu couldn't compare to him at all. And now, Yi Xian's status was many times more respected than his. Kuan Buyu simply couldn't compare to him in any way. Unexpectedly, Yi Xian actually treated him as a friend. That's how it is. I have a huge headache right now. I have no idea how to deal with my loss in the Overgod battlefield. Yi Xian briefly explained the situation to Kuan Buyu and Fian. Although Yi Xian didn't expect them to be able to help, at least one more person could think of countermeasures. But just as he finished speaking, he heard Flying Smoke reply, "Could it be that young master has forgotten your other identity?" Yi Xian frowned slightly. Another identity? What are you talking about? Fian faintly smiled and directly said to Yi Xian, "Why does young master think this little girl has always followed young master?" For a moment, Yi Xian couldn't answer at all. Thinking about it carefully, although Fian was indeed a slave bought by Yi Xian in the beginning, with Fian's ability and identity, how could she not abandon Yi Xian just because of this? In fact, even Fian becoming Yi Xian's slave was arranged by Fian. Or was it because of Yi Xian's space-devouring Feiyu? Of course, this wasn't impossible. But if it was for Feiyu, there was no need for Fian to go to such an extent. Thinking of Feiyu, Yi Xian suddenly thought of Feiyu's other identity. In fact,
Fei Yu could be considered one of Yi Xian's senior brothers. He also inherited the inheritance of the God Emperor, but inexplicably died. Could it be because of this reason? Suddenly, Yi Xian looked at Fian. It seems that young master has thought it through. That's right, this little girl is also from the ancient era. Ancient era. In an instant, Yi Xian understood everything. He understood why Fian was so obedient to him. Fian was actually from the ancient era's inheritance. This was simply beyond Yi Xian's imagination. It could be said that all of this was something that Yi Xian could never have imagined. Fian was actually from the ancient era's inheritance. Then, for such a long time, wasn't Yi Xian kept in the dark? Yi Xian frowned. However, Fian continued to explain, "Young master, don't be angry. In fact, strictly speaking, I'm not considered to be from the ancient era's inheritance. I only joined the ancient era's inheritance for some reason. Moreover, this little girl approached young master without any ill intentions." "Yes, you don't have any ill intentions. After all, you're from the ancient era's inheritance. How could you have any ill intentions towards me?" However, this feeling of being deceived really made Yi Xian uncomfortable. "Young master, please listen to this little girl." From the moment this little girl discovered young master, I knew that young master might have fallen into some kind of danger. In fact, this Kunlun God domain is not as perfect as young master imagines. It can be said that any inheritance of the ancient era's inheritance will be secretly removed in the Kunlun God domain. This little girl has secretly investigated before. The one who did all this is not God Lord Mimu, but someone else. However, that person seems to have a power that surpasses God Lord Mimu's in the Kunlun God domain. It's as if he's a huge mastermind behind the scenes. From the moment this little girl discovered young master, I knew that young master seemed to have been targeted by that mysterious power. That's why I hid my identity and came to young master's side. In fact, if it weren't for this matter, this little girl definitely wouldn't have revealed my identity. Fian's tone was very calm, as if she was just telling a story. However, the more Yi Xian listened, the more alarmed he became. Fian's words reminded Yi Xian of his own doubts. Back then, that mysterious old man had suddenly brought Yi Xian to the Kunlun God domain, making it impossible for Yi Xian to continue investigating the ancient era's inheritance. This had already aroused Yi Xian's suspicions. However, Mimu had always been good to Yi Xian. In addition, there was nothing worthy of Yi Xian's suspicions after that. So Yi Xian relaxed for a moment. But now that he heard Fian's words, Yi Xian realized that perhaps he was just being careless. Yi Xian's initial guess was not wrong at all. His appearance here was not a coincidence. Someone wanted to prevent him from coming into contact with the ancient era's inheritance. As for what the reason was, Yi Xian did not know. He couldn't even be sure if it was really that old man. After all, if it was that old man, why would Mimu, as that old man's disciple, take care of Yi Xian so much? It could be said that with Yi Xian's current status, even if he obtained the ancient era's inheritance, would not be much better. Moreover, Yi Xian's status could continue to rise. If it was that old man, then why did Mimu do that? Could it be that Mimu and that old man were not in cahoots? But the two of them were master and disciple after all. In any case, all of this was full of doubts, and it also made Yi Xian unable to figure out what to do. Suddenly, Yi Xian was slightly stunned. Because he realized that when Fian was talking to him just now, she had actually used some kind of secret technique. Yi Xian looked at Fian. Fian nodded silently, and Fian's voice rang out again. Chapter 2370. Sir, you may have a lot of questions, but I can't help you. All I can tell you is to be careful. 135-7924? 6810 GGGGGD. However, since Divine Lord Miyu has given you this chance, I ask that you take full advantage of it. The legacy of an ancient god emperor is not as simple as you imagine it to be. I hope that you can quickly build up your strength before you alert the other factions. There is still a long way to go in the future. Now, I am willing to return to the Dao clan and gather my clansmen to serve you. Don't worry, sir. My clan is not under the enemy's surveillance. The enemy doesn't even know that my clan is an ancient lost clan. Fian finished in one breath. Perhaps she had wanted to tell Yi Xian for a long time, but hadn't found the right opportunity. But this time, she had no choice but to expose herself. After all, Yi Xian was already in trouble. Yi Xian hesitated for a long time, then said, "All right, I believe you." Actually, Yi Xian didn't have anyone worth trusting now. Ever since he came to the Kunlun God domain, Fian had been by Yi Xian's side. If he couldn't trust Fian, then Yi Xian really didn't have anyone he could trust. Perhaps Fian really did hide it from Yi Xian, but so what? Fian didn't do anything bad to Yi Xian. In fact, she had always been extremely loyal. Moreover, from the way Fian used a voice transmission technique to tell Yi Xian, it was obvious that she was afraid of something. If Yi Xian still wanted to be calculative, then Yi Xian was too petty. After receiving Yi Xian's agreement, Fian got up and walked outside, preparing to return to her clan and ask for reinforcements for Yi Xian. One rat this time, Kuan Buyu walked to Yi Xian's side. Yi Xian asked Kuan Buyu, "What do you think? Do you have any good suggestions?" Kuan Buyu understood what Yi Xian was asking. He pondered for a moment, then said to Yi Xian, "Based on the current situation, you have two choices. First, you can issue a conscription order. After all, you are the provincial governor of Jiufeng and 60,000 territories. You can just issue a quota and I believe that no one will dare to reject it. Secondly, through the people I brought back, according to your instructions, this time, we brought back a total of 600 Kunlun disciples from our Jiufeng 60,000 territories. Moreover, many of them come from powerful families. If you can give them official positions, I believe that their families will be willing to help you." Yi Xian nodded. He understood Kuan Buyu's words very well. Was he trying to enforce his regional commander authority? This method might be the simplest, but it was easy to offend people. Although he was the provincial governor, after all, Yi Xian still needed to rely on those big families. If he went overboard, it would be even more difficult for him as the provincial governor. Giving these people official positions was, in fact, an offending thing. Yi Xian's provincial governor palace had just been built, so it did need a large number of officials to supplement it in order to operate normally. However, the need to supplement didn't mean that this method had to be used. Suddenly, Yi Xian had a flash of inspiration. He said to Kuan Buyu, "Say, if I directly use official positions as a lure to get everyone to work, would it be possible? I will directly link all official positions to military merits. As long as they can obtain enough military merits, I will give them the corresponding official position. Do you think this method will work?" Kuan Buyu was slightly taken aback. Yi Xian's method was very novel. After all, in the Kunlun divine realm, every position below the regional governor was basically a position that rarely changed in hundreds of thousands of years. Other than Yi Xian, which other regional governor didn't receive the support of the entire region after receiving an order? During every overgod battle, the provincial governor didn't need to do anything. All the factions would send their elites to the battlefield. After all, they were bound to the provincial governor for good or ill. Yes, your method is feasible. However, it seems impossible to create a complete military merit system. After all, there are too many variables in the overgod battle. How can we create a complete military merit system? At least, from what I know, no faction can do this. Moreover, there is no way to calculate military merits. Really? Others couldn't do it, but it didn't mean that Yi Xian couldn't do it. This was because Yi Xian had the system. Yi Xian himself was a master of seals and talismans. Since this method is feasible, then I know what to do. Unexpectedly, the problem that Yi Xian had been worrying about for a long time could be solved in an instant. System: I need to create a complete military merit reward and punishment system in the overgod battle. At the same time, I need to create a suitable monitoring treasure. Can you do that? Ding! System notification. This calculation is too large. A large amount of faith points will be consumed. Does the host confirm? Confirm. Wasn't it just faith points? Yi Xian could afford it. Actually, Yi Xian also understood why the system said that the data was too large. After all, in the overgod battle, there were hundreds of millions of battles. To directly monitor the military merits of every soldier and every general was definitely not a simple task. This was also the reason why the other regional commanders were unable to do so. However, Yi Xian could do it. This was because Yi Xian had his own trump card. Ding! System notification. Plan successfully created. Ding! System notification. For the military merit plan, the host needs a large amount of resources, military merit rings. A military merit ring was a special ring that automatically recorded the battle situation of the wearer and gave a comprehensive evaluation. This ring was divided into 9 grades. The first grade was the lowest grade recording ring. After that, the second grade would calculate the military merits of the first grade at a fixed time. It would also supervise the battles of higher grades, and so on. There was only one 9th grade military merit ring. It would automatically integrate with the host's universe ring. As long as the host's subordinates reached the required military merits, the system would automatically announce their official positions. It was that simple. With the system, the military merit system that other provincial governors couldn't do anything about was just a simple matter for Yi Xian. Of course, this time, Yi Xian would have to spend a lot of money. After all, this was a military merit ring that was in the hundreds of millions. With such a large amount, even if the materials used were not very high grade, it would still be a huge expense. Yi Xian directly threw in all the resources that flying smoke brought back. At the same time, Chairman Ye's face equipment pavilion was fully activated. One ring after another was quickly produced. Chapter 2371. I don't care who you are. Dang. Yi Xian's eyes flickered as he gave the order. In the next moment, Black Horn turned into a streak of black light and pierced through the chest of the little-eyed monkey soldier. Dang. 2 second-grade saints had fallen just like that. Good, well done. After they died, Yi Xian couldn't help but praise them before quickly putting away the corpses of the 2 monkey soldiers. Wei Zhentian's soul search. Yi Xian ordered again. After a while, these 2 monkey soldiers are indeed from the Divine Monkey Manor. They were ordered by the Divine Monkey Manor's Manor Lord to expand their territory. Yi Xian thought to himself. These 2 monkey soldiers had already plundered a lot of resources from many forces before they met them, so they were quite valuable. However, what attracted Yi Xian's attention was that these 2 monkey soldiers each had a life monkey fur on their bodies. Yi Xian quickly found it, then looked at the 2 life monkey hairs and thought to himself, the aptitude of a monkey soldier that can condense life monkey hairs isn't bad, and this Divine Monkey Palace might be related to the Divine Monkey Palace. The Divine Monkey Palace's palace master is also Potion's ancestor, so giving these 2 life monkey hairs to Patian might have some effect. Then, he tossed the 2 life-saving monkey hairs to Heaven Breaker. Patian received the 2 life monkey hairs and carefully played with them. In the end, what surprised Yi Xian was that the 2 life monkey hairs were refined by Patian and grew on his body. Patian, you've become stronger? Yi Xian raised his brows. Squeak! Patian nodded his head. These 2 life monkey hairs had directly doubled his strength. It was a pity that Potion's cultivation level was too low. Even if he were to double his strength and wear the profound god battle armor, he probably wouldn't be able to defeat Luo. Not bad, not bad. If I had more life monkey hairs, Patian might be able to be like the World Annihilation Ghost Dragon. Thinking of this, Yi Xian's eyes lit up. However, there was still a fundamental difference between Patian and the World Annihilation Ghost Dragon. That was fusion. Yi Xian could fuse with the World Annihilation Ghost Dragon, but he could only fuse with the World Annihilation Ghost Dragon. Therefore, no matter how strong Patian was, he couldn't compare to the World Annihilation Ghost Dragon. In the future, I will definitely be able to fuse with it. I just don't know how to do it. Could it be that I want a random reward? Yi Xian's eyes narrowed slightly. He decided not to think about this anymore and continued on his way. From the 2 monkey soldiers, one could tell that the Divine Monkey Mansion's mansion master was extremely ambitious and wholeheartedly wanted to expand his territory. His strength was indeed very strong, but if he did so, it would only arouse the dissatisfaction of the surrounding forces. After all, there were still a few forces around the same strength as the Divine Monkey Mansion. However, this was a good thing for Yi Xian. After all, he needed some life monkey hairs to strengthen the heaven-breaking Divine Ape. What Yi Xian didn't expect was that the heaven-breaking Divine Ape could actually sense the location of these monkey soldiers. This was another piece of great news for Yi Xian. Previously, the World Annihilation Ghost Dragon could sense the aura of the World Annihilation Dragon Scale, but now, the heaven-breaking Divine Ape could sense the aura of the surrounding monkey soldiers. Relying on Patian, Yi Xian quickly rushed towards the monkey soldiers. These monkey soldiers that were sent out by the Divine Monkey Mansion's mansion master were at least at the saint level. However, with Yi Xian's current situation, it was best to find trouble with the low-level saint-level monkey soldiers. In just a few days, Yi Xian had obtained more than 10 life monkey hairs. As for those monkey soldiers, some were killed, some were suppressed, and some were swallowed by Black Horn, which meant that they were stored in the planting space. Potion's strength began to increase rapidly. The current Yi Xian had no way to investigate the matter of the middle-aged man with bullhorns. At this moment, the distance between him and Yi Xian was like a human looking up at the sun. Right now, it was still best to increase his strength. Ding! Host has broken through. Current rank: 3rd grade True Emperor. Ding! Ghost Lord Yan Ming, Wei Zhentian, and Heaven-breaking Divine Ape have broken through. Current rank: 7th grade True Emperor. Right now, Old Shu's strength could no longer keep up. Only the Heaven-breaking Divine Ape could. With its strength, if it were to wear the 3rd grade Profound God battle armor, it would have already reached the half-saint realm. However, there were still 2 generals above it, Luo Luo and Black Horn. If it wanted to surpass them, it still needed a lot of life monkey hairs. The reason why the monkey soldiers of the Divine Monkey Mansion were stronger than human geniuses was because of this life monkey hairs. Moreover, each monkey soldier didn't necessarily have only one. The more life monkey hairs they had, the better their aptitude was. Yi Xian had previously encountered a powerful monkey soldier with 3 life monkey hairs. At that time, he had the 10,000 beast diagram to suppress him, but he was still able to fight Black Horn to a draw. But in the end, he still couldn't defeat Yi Xian and the others and was killed on the spot. At this rate, Potion's strength will be able to catch up to the much higher realms of Luo Luo and Black Horn in a month. Yi Xian nodded in satisfaction. After all, the Heaven-breaking Divine Ape was only a 7th grade True Emperor, while Luo Luo was already a 7th grade half-saint. The difference between the two was an entire realm. However, just as Yi Xian was rushing along, a powerful aura suddenly chased after him. Patian sensed that it was at least a 4th grade saint. If it was before, Yi Xian might have been afraid, but now that Black Horn had broken through to the 8th grade half-saint, as long as a 5th grade saint didn't come, everything would be fine. Very quickly, the monkey soldier arrived in front of Yi Xian. Then, he looked at the miniature Patian and raised his brows. A mere True Emperor actually has more than 10 life monkey hairs? How is this possible? The monkey soldier was terrified. Just now he was far away, and he suspected that he had sensed wrongly. Now that he had found his way here, he was sure that his senses were correct. He wasn't even a half-saint, yet he was able to condense more than 10 life monkey hairs. His aptitude was truly explosive. My lord, may I know your name? The monkey soldier couldn't help but ask. Name? When Patian, who was standing on Gu Tao's back, heard this, he couldn't help but look at Yi Xian. Just say that your name is Sun Patian. Yi Xian hurriedly sent a sound transmission to Patian. The Heaven-breaking Divine Ape originally didn't have a name. At that time, the people of the Dragon Territory called it Little Monkey. Later on, after being tamed by Yi Xian, it was given the name Patian. However, at that time, the middle-aged man had also mentioned the Heaven-breaking Divine Ape bloodline, so Yi Xian hurriedly added the word Sun. In Yi Xian's memories, whenever a monkey was mentioned, he would think of a classic character. Adding the word Sun was very appropriate. Squeak! Patian said. Ordinary people wouldn't be able to understand these words, but the monkey soldier in front of Patian did. What? His surname is Sun? The 5th grade Saint Monkey Soldier was extremely shocked. Chapter 2372. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. Among them, one of them was the leader. He did not participate in the battle, but was responsible for dispatching the troops. 135-7924? 6810 GGGGGD. Without exception, all the people leading the team were guards of the Divine Palace. What surprised Yi Xian was that the leader of Yi Xian's side was someone who had followed Yi Xian to defeat the demon race's invasion. At this moment, that person smiled and nodded at Yi Xian, but did not say anything. He didn't expect that Yi Xian would be the one leading him a while ago, but now, he was the one leading Yi Xian. There was no opening ceremony. When the 10 experts stood in the air, it meant that the battle had officially begun. You go first. The leader of Yi Xian's side pointed at a person and said, Mu Chen is the first to go. Someone muttered softly, but immediately shut his mouth. This was not a place to talk casually. System, detect the strength of those two people. Yi Xian wouldn't ask too much, but he was able to find out the strength of the two through the system. Ding! Target set, Mu Chen. Rank 1 lower Divine King. Ding! Target set, MOCU. Rank 1 lower Divine King. Who would have thought that the two of them were both kings? This battle was going to be interesting. Human brat. Tell me your name. I MOCU. Will not kill a nameless person. The names of the people from the demon god domain were very different from those from the Kunlun god domain. Perhaps only the people from the demon god domain would know the meaning of these awkward names. At this moment, MOCU from the demon god domain said proudly to Mu Chen. Unfortunately, Mu Chen did not seem to care about him at all. Mu Chen waved his hand, and immediately, dozens of divine swords appeared beside him. These divine swords circled around Mu Chen, flying up and down. This Mu Chen had mastered the law of the sword. The sword Dao law was a relatively common law. This law was only useful for divine swords. It could effectively enhance the offensive and defensive abilities of divine swords. Moreover, it also had some special functions. Of course, every cultivator of the sword Dao law would have different special abilities. Yi Xian wanted to see what kind of special sword Dao law Mu Chen possessed. Whoosh! Suddenly, a divine sword flew out. It was clearly just a divine sword, but in an instant, the sky was filled with sword shadows. 1 into 10,000? A conventional method of using sword Dao laws was nothing special. Mo Chu curled his lips disdainfully and waved his hand. Immediately, 10,000 phantoms of divine beasts appeared in the sky. These phantoms didn't care about anything else and directly charged at the sword phantoms. Boom! 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 A series of explosions rang out. Unfortunately, no one on either side would care about such a battle. Suddenly, the 10,000 sword silhouettes that were exploding suddenly split into countless sword silhouettes. Each sword shadow actually split into 5 at the same time. The 5 different colors represented the intangible elements of metal, wood, water, fire, and earth. 6 types of laws. Mu Chen had actually mastered 6 types of laws. Moreover, it included an entire set of attribute laws. Yi Xian was slightly moved. Mu Chen could be considered a genius to be able to control 6 types of laws. After the sword phantoms split apart, they were immediately guided by the invisible attribute and erupted with a powerful might. They actually directly resisted the attacks of the mythological beast phantoms. Even after killing the mythological beast phantoms, they didn't suffer any losses. One had to know that Mu Chen had only released 1 divine sword, yet there were already so many changes. It could be said that this was enough to make people raise their eyebrows. If this wasn't the Overgod battle ring, Mu Chen's performance would definitely be exchanged for countless cheers. However, in this place, Mu Chen's performance could only be described as ordinary. Not bad. You actually control 6 types of laws. Looks like I have to use some strength. The corners of Mo Chu's mouth curled up slightly. Suddenly, a ray of light appeared in his hand. That ray of light was actually formed by countless divine beasts. What kind of technique was this? Those divine beasts had clearly condensed into a standard military formation. Could it be that Mo Chu had actually summoned divine beasts that had already been trained into an army? Most importantly, those divine beasts were actually able to achieve perfect coordination. In an instant, all the divine beasts and divine sword silhouettes clashed again. Mu Chen waited for a moment. When he saw that his divine sword silhouettes couldn't gain the upper hand, he waved his hand and another divine sword flew out. After this divine sword flew out, it immediately turned into a long dragon and rushed towards the dark divine beast army formation. Boom! The long dragon directly knocked the army formation apart. One had to know that the long dragon was formed by countless divine sword silhouettes. Those divine sword silhouettes each had a powerful attack power. Not bad, not bad. Human, you're quite capable. Then, I'll let you experience my self-created mystique. Self-created mystique. This time, even Yi Xian couldn't remain calm. One had to know that self-created mystique wasn't as simple as just saying one sentence. The current mystiques were basically passed down from ancient times. Even if one could self-create a mystique, it could be said that only people at Mi Yan's level could do it. Regardless of how powerful it was, The fact that this person could self-create a mystique was already enough to prove that he was a genius. In fact, even Yi Xian couldn't self-create a mystique. This was because Yi Xian's mystiques all came from the system. In an instant, even the powerhouses who were acting as judges looked over. Following Mo Chu's words, a faint light emitted from his body. That light didn't seem to be threatening at all, but it gave off an unimaginable pressure. Moreover, this pressure grew stronger and stronger. After a moment, this pressure actually surrounded Mu Chen as if it was solid. Using pressure as a means of attack wasn't a rare thing. However, this person's next move shocked everyone. Pressure self-explosion. Boom. With a loud bang, Mu Chen was blown up until blood flowed out of his 7 orifices. Pressure sword form. In an instant, the powerful pressure condensed into a divine sword and pierced through Mu Chen's body. After a moment, Mu Chen fell straight to the ground. There wasn't even a wound on his body. Everyone was flabbergasted, and some were even dumbfounded. Even Yi Xian was a little flustered at this moment. Pressure could self-explode? And it could even transform into a divine sword. What was going on? Not to mention seeing it, almost no one had heard of such a technique. What was pressure? It was nothing more than an aura. It could be said that this thing was completely useless against someone who was stronger than him. Chapter 2373. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation, however, it was this kind of illusory pressure that someone was actually able to turn it into a physical attack. Furthermore, it could be controlled at will. 135-7924? 6810 GGGGGD this time. Even in the Overgods arena, everyone was talking about it. Clearly, even the Overgods arena could not suppress the curiosity of the crowd. The Demon God's domain wins. An elite from the Demon God's domain announced the result. Mu Chen's corpse was also brought back. Mo Chu walked down the arena casually, as if he had done something insignificant. The first battle. Just the first battle was enough to show Yi Xian the cruelty of the Overgods arena. Moreover, Mu Chen wasn't a nobody. From the whispers of the crowd, Yi Xian knew that Mu Chen was probably a famous genius in the Kunlun domain. Who would have thought that he would be defeated so easily? Left with no choice, Yi Xian began to consider his own strength. Eternal points could give Yi Xian a sure win opportunity because the eternal field could definitely allow Yi Xian to crush any opponent. However, this was not a one-off battle. Yi Xian had to consider his conventional strength. It was obviously not feasible to raise his cultivation level now. After all, Yi Xian was representing a first-grade lower divine king. If Yi Xian devoured resources to raise his cultivation level now, he would only be eliminated. In the Overgods arena, it was not allowed to hide one's cultivation level or make a sudden breakthrough. Therefore, what could Yi Xian do? Mystique. Indeed, Yi Xian needed an effective mystique now. System, I want to exchange for mystiques with resources and faith points. Give me a list of the strongest mystiques that I can exchange for now. The system could exchange for items, but Yi Xian had not used it before. Firstly, it was not worth it. Secondly, Yi Xian did not have so many resources in the past. However, it was different now. Yi Xian had accumulated a lot of resources from the devouring space. Moreover, he could exchange for faith points. Ding! According to the host's current resources and faith points, the system will automatically choose 3 mystiques that the host can exchange for at most. What did Yi Xian mean by at most? It meant that he could exchange for mystiques by emptying all his resources and faith points. 3 choices, huh? That was not bad. Alright, I'd like to see what they are. Yi Xian didn't hesitate and directly checked. Ding! Choice 1. Infinite Critical Strike. Is a supportive mystique. Once it is activated, any attack of the host will have infinite critical strike. However, the higher the critical strike, the higher the chance, the rate. Yi Xian shook his head. This divine ability didn't seem to be of any use to him. One had to know that Yi Xian's attack already had a one-hit kill effect. Although the chances were small, it still existed, not to mention that it was far inferior to this boundless critical strike. Translation. Is translation. Once this ability is used, it can create an absolute ice domain with a radius of 100 miles. Within this domain, even time can be frozen. Absolute Zero seemed like a good choice, but Yi Xian did not choose it immediately. The reason was simple. The range of this mystique was too small. It was only a radius of 100 miles. In such a small range, the enemy would be able to dodge it easily. Could it be that before Yi Xian used this mystique, he would need to discuss with the enemy beforehand so that the enemy would not move recklessly? Therefore, he could only give up on this ability for now. Ding! Choice 3. Inaction Divine Ability. Wu Wei Divine Art. You can use a special divine soul chain to link yourself and the enemy together. After that, any damage suffered by both sides will be shared equally between both sides. What kind of divine ability was this? Yi Xian blinked a few times, unable to react. However, he quickly understood. In this game, it seemed like it was a competition of who could recover faster and who could last longer. If the two of them were linked together, the damage would be shared equally. Even if the enemy could insta-kill Yi Xian, they would not be able to do so. This was because half of the damage would be shared with the enemy. When the time came, it would be a competition of who could recover first. The key was that this mystique was controlled by Yi Xian. Therefore, Yi Xian could choose to buff or cancel it in time. What a shameless mystique! It could be said that this was the most shameless mystique that Yi Xian had ever seen. This mystique was indeed a good choice for tricking others, especially those who were stronger than oneself. In an instant, Yi Xian found it difficult to choose. He did not expect that the 3 choices given to him by the system would be such oddities. Absolute Zero was powerful, but its range was too small. Infinite critical hits could be ignored. However, this inaction divine ability was a double-edged sword. How should Yi Xian choose? Or should he give up on these 3 choices and choose again? However, after some hesitation, Yi Xian finally chose Absolute Zero. Don't forget Yi Xian's spiritual sense control and the 6 syllables of Sanskrit. He even had restrictions and talismans to assist him. Although Absolute Zero had a small range, it was powerful enough. As for Yi Xian, he had many ways to prevent the enemy from reacting when Yi Xian used Absolute Zero. System, I choose Absolute Zero Mystique. Ding! The host has successfully exchanged for Absolute Zero Mystique. All of the host's belief points and resources have been cleared. The belief points and resources that he had saved up for so long were cleared just like that. If Yi Xian could not recoup his investment this time, he would probably suffer a huge loss. However, after Yi Xian obtained Absolute Zero and read its detailed description, he felt slightly relieved. Absolute Zero could be upgraded. After upgrading, the attack range would be even larger. At the very least, this did give Yi Xian some relief. While Yi Xian was exchanging for a divine ability, another battle had already ended. And at this moment, the team leader finally pointed to Yi Xian. This time, Yi Xian would be taking the field. Yi Xian did not hesitate and immediately flew over. Soon, the opponents from the demon god domain also rushed over. System, detect the opponent's strength. Ding! System notification. Target is a first-grade general divine king. Was this the title of a general? Yi Xian's 6-syllable Sanskrit mantra could decide life and death with a single word. However, it could only be used against those with lower realms than him. Strictly speaking, the death symbol mantra of the 6-syllable Sanskrit mantra was already at a higher cultivation level than Yi Xian. Therefore, the death symbol mantra of the 6-syllable Sanskrit mantra was completely ineffective against him. Otherwise, Yi Xian would not have considered so much. He would have just used the 6-syllable mantra and killed whoever he was facing. Unfortunately, although the 6-syllable mantra was powerful, it had many restrictions. Tell me your name, human. That guy from the demon god domain was actually playing the same game with Yi Xian. Unfortunately, Yi Xian had no intention of paying attention to him. A mere title of a general was nothing to Yi Xian. Chapter 2374. Squeak? What's your name? Patian called out. Sun Lei, a monkey general under the blazing sun sage. The monkey general introduced himself. Yi Xian had once searched the souls of 2 monkey soldiers, so he knew that the divine monkey mansion had 4 great sages and a mansion lord. This blazing sun sage was one of the great sages, so there was no need to talk about his realm. Squeak, squeak, squeak. Patian continued. This was what Yi Xian wanted him to say. He wanted the monkey general to not tell the higher-ups about him. Otherwise, yes, this subordinate understands.
Sun Lei hurriedly nodded. This subordinate is willing to follow my lord. Squeak!
Patian nodded in satisfaction. Just like that, Yi Xian's team had another super combat strength. With him around, as long as he didn't encounter a great sage expert, Yi Xian could do whatever he wanted. After all, he still had the mystic divine battle armor. However, things weren't that simple. Although Sun Lei said that he wouldn't tell the higher-ups, he felt that Potion's status was too high to let anything happen to him. Thus, he risked the danger of Patian punishing him to secretly send a message to the higher-ups. However, what surprised him was, after the Blazing Sun Sage found out, he informed the Mansion Lord of the Divine Monkey Mansion about this matter. However, the Mansion Lord said that there was no such person as Sun Patian. There was no name, nor was there a super genius who could condense dozens of life monkey hairs at the level of a first-grade half-sage. Sun Patian was actually not a member of the Divine Monkey Mansion. Due to Sun Lei's high cultivation level, Yi Xian didn't notice that Sun Lei was so shocked that he couldn't speak. He looked at the sky-splitting divine ape in front of him, who was wearing the mystic divine battle armor, and hesitated. Just now, the Blazing Sun Sage had sent a message to him, asking him to capture the heaven-breaking divine ape and bring it back to the Divine Monkey Mansion. However, what made him hesitate was that Patian had actually broken through to the second-grade half-sage realm at this time. Patian, who was a first-grade half-sage, had killed a sixth-grade sage and could fight head-on against a seventh-grade sage. Even the Mansion Lord of the Divine Monkey Mansion was shocked by his aptitude. Therefore, Sun Lei wasn't confident that he could capture Patian. Thus, he secretly contacted the 2 monkey generals nearby. Lord Sun, I found 2 more monkey generals nearby. They're rushing over. At this time, Sun Lei suddenly stepped forward and said respectfully, Squeak! Well done. Heavenbreaker grinned and jumped onto Sun Lei's shoulder. Soon, the 2 monkey generals arrived. Both of them were 7th-grade monkey generals who had condensed more than 15 strands of natal monkey fur. Their strength was comparable to the 8th-grade saints of the Green Rock Pavilion. Greetings, Lord Sun. The 2 monkey generals said respectfully. However, they had already found out about this matter. Therefore, they wanted to get close to Patian first before working together with Sun Lei to capture Patian. Since nothing unexpected had happened before, Yi Xian didn't think too much about it and accepted the 2 of them. While Heavenbreaker was still rejoicing over the fact that he had gained 2 new generals, Sun Lei and the 2 new monkey generals suddenly surrounded him. What are you doing? Yi Xian couldn't help but ask. He was only in the true emperor realm. Therefore, the 3 of them didn't care about him at all. What? Patian was shocked. He didn't expect Sun Lei to collude with these 2 to capture him. No way. In an instant, Patian erupted with a powerful force. However, his strongest move was the heaven-shocking 36 staves. Now that he was being controlled, he couldn't attack. Squeak! What are you doing? Patian asked in surprise. When Sun Lei heard this, he replied, Lord Sun, I'm sorry. The Manor Lord has invited you back. Manor Lord. When Yi Xian and Patian heard this, they understood that the matter had been exposed. How could they possibly know the Manor Lord of the Divine Monkey Manor? It seems like someone secretly reported it. It should be Sun Lei. Yi Xian immediately reacted. He had been fine before, but after Sun Lei arrived, an accident occurred. Of course, it was also possible that someone else had reported it. Sun Lei had also snuck in like the other 2. No matter what, the matter had been exposed. Even if Patian was a second-grade half-saint, he wasn't a match for 3 7th-grade saints, not to mention that he was being restrained now. Although Yi Xian could directly put Patian away and escape, these 3 monkey generals each had more than 10 life monkey hairs. How could he let them go just like that? Time reversal. Yi Xian had no choice but to use time reversal to return to the day before he met Sun Lei. Today, Monkey King hadn't been chased by the experts of the Green Rock Pavilion, so it was enough for the time reversal skill to cool down. Next, the matter will repeat itself. At that time, I can't let Sun Lei report it. I have to send it into the planting space. Yi Xian thought to himself. He was wondering if Sun Lei already knew about it when he met him. If he didn't know, then it meant that Sun Lei had reported to the Divine Monkey Mansion. At that time, Sun Lei would probably listen to Potion's words. As long as he entered the planting space, Yi Xian would be able to restrain him and lure out the other 2 monkey generals.
Of course, if Sun Lei already knew that Patian was a fake when he met Patian, then he would probably have to fight him directly. No matter what, Yi Xian wanted to give this situation a try first. He wanted to see if Sun Lei already knew that Patian was a fake when he met Patian. Lord Yi Xian, this is bad. The Green Rock Pavilion has organized a large group of people to hunt us down. Monkey King sent another message. Prior to this, Yi Xian had already asked Wei Zhentian to search the souls of all the monkey soldiers in the planting space. These people all obeyed his orders and did not report this matter. Immediately, Yi Xian once again tore through the void and killed all of the pursuers from the Green Rock Pavilion. Then, the 8th grade saint from the Green Rock Pavilion descended and violently beat up Patian. Then, Sun Lei appeared and used the mystic divine armor to instantly kill the 8th grade saint. Squeak squeak, squeak squeak squeak. I think you're not bad. Be my follower. Patian said to Sun Lei. Sun Lei's eyes lit up as he hurriedly cupped his fists and said, "This subordinate is willing to serve Lord Sun." Squeak squeak squeak. If that's the case, then don't resist. As Patian spoke, a wave of energy enveloped Sun Lei. When Sun Lei saw this, he resisted at first, but he gave up in the end. In the next moment, he appeared in the planting space. Here, even if he was a 7th grade saint, he was at Yi Xian's mercy. At this moment, Yi Xian had already taken Monkey King and the others in and started searching their souls one by one. However, he didn't find anything. I didn't find anything. Looks like Sun Lei reported it later. Yi Xian thought to himself. Lord, what is this place? Sun Lei asked curiously. Chapter 2375. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. The system alarms sounded continuously. That person was simply floating in the air, not moving at all. However, Yi Xian was constantly being attacked. What an amazing shadow assault. This skill was actually so powerful. At this moment, Yi Xian finally understood why the leader wanted him to face this person. It was obvious that the leader had some understanding of Yi Xian's strength. 135-7924? 6810 GGGGGD, and this person was obviously a genius from the demon god's domain that was being watched closely. The leader wanted to hand this difficult match to Yi Xian because if it were anyone else, unless they had some special detection technique, they would only be sending themselves to their deaths. This leader had fought alongside Yi Xian before. Perhaps he had already seen some clues about Yi Xian. Of course, it was also possible that he had made this decision because of Mi Yan's suggestion. Yi Xian was constantly dodging on the stage, but the enemy's attacks did not stop at all. Even now, Yi Xian did not know what kind of attack the enemy was using. System, can you analyze the enemy's attack method and see what it is? Yi Xian asked the system as he dodged. If he could figure out what kind of attack method the enemy was using, then he would undoubtedly be able to come up with a plan to counter it. Ding! System notification. Analyzing target's data. Ding! Analysis complete. Target is using the Law of Shadows. The Law of Shadows borrowed the power of shadows. It was incomparably strange. Furthermore, every person who had mastered the Law of Shadows would have their own understanding of it and use certain special abilities. The Law of Shadows. Yi Xian should have guessed that it was the Law of Shadows. After all, wasn't this guy's ability called Shadow Assault? After knowing that the opponent was using the Law of Shadows, Yi Xian began to silently observe while dodging. There were many restrictions to the Law of Shadows. Yi Xian believed that this person would definitely leave behind some flaws. Even though his attacks were powerful now, he was definitely not invincible. Wei Zhentian, test the attack. Yi Xian waved his hand and the two god-slaying swords flew out at the same time. Boom! 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 The two god-slaying swords simultaneously launched the deity-slaying slash. That was 14 deity-vanquishing slashes. Moreover, because the opponent was a demon god, it was an absolute critical hit. However, the result left Yi Xian flabbergasted. That was because the 14 attacks did not hurt the enemy at all. As the 14 attacks were unleashed, a faint barrier appeared around the enemy. This barrier even blocked the deity-slaying slash. Was it the power of the Law of Darkness again? How was he supposed to break it? Boom! Suddenly, Yi Xian made a mistake in dodging and was hit by an invisible attack. His figure was knocked back in an instant. However, Yi Xian quickly steadied himself.
The law of shadows. Could it be that he was borrowing shadows? No, there was no such thing as a shadow in this arena. Even if there was a shadow, it could only be the enemy or the shadow beside Yi Xian. Suddenly, Yi Xian had a flash of inspiration. Yes, it was the shadow. The law of shadows. The method of borrowing attacks should be the shadow. However, the enemy was very likely using some mysterious law power to control Yi Xian's shadow. Why did Yi Xian not notice the enemy's attack at all? That was because these attacks were launched by Yi Xian's shadow. In other words, Yi Xian was attacking himself. What a terrifying method. This mystique was simply impossible to defend against. If Yi Xian had not reacted in time, he would have been dragged to death by himself. The law of shadows mystique to control the opponent's shadow? Since Yi Xian knew, then it was easy to explain. Since he was attacking himself through his own shadow, then all he had to do was prevent his own shadow from appearing. Wouldn't that be enough? Others might not be able to do it, but Yi Xian had countless ways to do it. Actually, this guy's greatest strength did not lie in his mastery of the law of shadows. It was his attacks. If one could not see through them, there was no way to counter them. And during a battle, who could be like Yi Xian and have the leisure to think? After understanding this, Yi Xian's body suddenly erupted with a powerful light. This was just a simple use of God power. It was just gathering God power around his body to form a light circle. Of course, this did not mean that there was no shadow. However, due to the obstruction of God power, the enemy could not use his mysterious power to control Yi Xian's shadow. As expected, following Yi Xian's actions, that person was clearly stunned. Boom! This was a high-level battle. How could Yi Xian be stunned? How could he miss such a good opportunity? Drawing the bow and knocking the arrow was completed in an instant. In an instant, that person was sent flying. However, the enemy's body was protected by a shadow, so he did not suffer any serious injuries. Human, you can actually see through the mystery of my shadow attack. It looks like you will definitely die today. That person looked at Yi Xian, his tone clearly a little agitated. After all, once his mystique was seen through, it was worthless. It could even be said that even a low-level first-grade Divine Lord could use God power to render his mystique ineffective. That person quickly rushed over again, his eyes cold as he looked at Yi Xian. Human brat, you force me to do this. Then, I will let you know what it means to be in endless darkness. Domain. Eternal night. In an instant, Yi Xian lost the ability to see, whether it was his divine will or his eyes. At this moment, Yi Xian was completely enveloped in darkness. However, in the eyes of others, Yi Xian did not seem to have any abnormalities around him. The eternal night domain plunged people into absolute darkness forever. This guy actually mastered such a domain. It could be said that this domain was not an ability that a divine king should have. Who exactly was he? Why did he have so many mysterious techniques? However, Yi Xian's lips curled up slightly. Yi Xian was actually smiling. Yes, Yi Xian was smiling. He was lamenting the enemy's ignorance. Did the enemy not know that Yi Xian relied on the system? Even if his divine will was sealed, even if his eyes could not see, so what? Yi Xian had the system. Of course, the enemy could not possibly know this. Re-1R ding. System notification. Detected the ability to forcibly devour the power of the laws. Does the host wish to devour it? Devour. If that person found out that his ultimate move had become Yi Xian's method to increase his strength, would he be angered to death? Forcibly devour the power of the laws directly. It was that capricious. Although the triggering conditions were uncontrollable, at least he would not drop the ball at critical moments. Chapter 2376. Law being in an instant, a mysterious power erupted from Yi Xian's body. 135-7924? 6810 GGGGGD. Others might not know about this power, but how could the enemy, who had also mastered the law of shadows, not know? At this moment, he was completely stunned. Impossible, how can you also master the law of shadows? That person looked at Yi Xian in horror. After all, Yi Xian didn't have the aura of the law of shadows at all. Most importantly, the aura of the law of shadows that Yi Xian was displaying now was very similar to his own. It was almost identical. One had to know that the law of shadows was considered a system of laws, but very few people had mastered it. Now, not only did Yi Xian master the law of shadows, but he also mastered a similar ability. How could he accept this? Eternal Night Domain. The corner of Yi Xian's mouth slightly curled up as he directly used this domain. This time, the devouring had made Yi Xian a huge profit. Ding! System notification. Host's forced devouring has succeeded. Ding! Congratulations to host for mastering the law of shadows. Ding! Congratulations to host for mastering the Eternal Night Domain. Ding! Congratulations to host for mastering the shadow manipulation mystique. When he heard these notifications from the system, it was already destined that the enemy was going to be in for a tragedy. As Yi Xian used the Eternal Night Domain, that person fell into his own domain in an instant. Unfortunately, this Eternal Night Domain was used by Yi Xian, so he couldn't withdraw it at all. Perhaps if he was given time, even if it was just a few minutes, he could break it. But how could Yi Xian give him that much time? Shadow manipulation, shadow assault, attack. At Yi Xian's command, that person instantly tasted the attack from his own shadow. So what if he knew? The enemy had no way of breaking it because he was running out of time. Just as the enemy was preparing to release his divine power to block the attack like Yi Xian's voice rang out again. Absolute zero. In an instant, that person was frozen in place, and Wei Tian, who was already on standby, directly controlled the two Godslayer swords to attack. He was killed without any suspense. In absolute zero, the enemy couldn't do anything, let alone resist. Ding! System notification. Congratulations to the host for killing the Dark Knight Heavenly King, 5th Prince of the Demon God Realm. The host has devoured the shadow of the 5th Prince and leveled up. Ding! System notification. In view of the host's current situation, the level has been automatically locked. The host can choose to activate it at any time. Ding! System notification. Host has killed a special Yao Celestial, the 5th Prince of the Dark Knight Heavenly King. Reward: 3 random draws. Leveled up? Furthermore, he even won a lottery? This time, even Yi Xian was caught off guard. It seemed like he had not devoured the 5th Prince, nor had he devoured any resources. So what exactly was it that made Yi Xian upgrade? Ding! System notification. Dark Knight Heavenly King's 5th Prince belongs to a special race, the Dark Knight Divine Spirit race. This race has no physical body and is a special race of laws. As for the body that others see, it is merely a puppet. As for the power of laws that the host forcibly devours, it is the enemy's body. A creature of laws? There was actually such a mysterious race. Yi Xian found it hard to understand the existence of such a race. A race of laws. In other words, they themselves were the power of laws? This was simply the best food prepared for Yi Xian to forcibly devour. Yi Xian even hoped that there would be more of such races of laws. However, the system also said that this was an extremely special race, which proved that they were extremely rare. No wonder there was such a generous reward this time. Not only did it increase his level, but there were also 3 random draws. That was because this guy was a super rare existence. As Yi Xian devoured this race of laws, his puppet body naturally turned into a puff of green smoke and disappeared. At this time, the people of the Demon God Realm, including the experts who were the judges, were all shocked. Someone had actually killed the 5th Prince of the Dark Knight. One had to know that this 5th Prince of the Dark Knight was in existence with an immortal body. No matter the person or the attack method, they would not be a threat to him at all. But how did Yi Xian do it? Of course, Yi Xian himself was also a little confused. When he devoured the power of laws, this guy was fine, but when the god-slaying sword killed him, this guy was considered dead. Logically speaking, he was a race of laws. Then, when Yi Xian devoured the power of laws, he should have been dead. However, this was not the case. He only died after Wei Zhentian killed him. Yes, it was the Godhead. No matter what, this guy still had the Godhead. As long as the Godhead was not destroyed, even if Yi Xian devoured the power of laws, it would not be a fatal threat to him. Therefore, the real fatal blow was still Wei Zhentian's attack. It was Wei Zhentian's attack that shattered this guy's Godhead and killed him. Re-1R, what a strange race. What a strange race. In the realm of gods, who knew how many other strange races like this existed? Yi Xian did not care about the strange gazes of the people of the Demon God Realm. he directly returned to the Kunlun god realm. Many people of the demon god realm were still shocked by this guy's death. It was obvious how popular this guy was. The fifth prince could be said to be the biggest dark horse of the demon god divine domain in the first-grade divine king realm. But now, the black horse didn't even have the time to use his abilities before he was killed by Yi Xian. This naturally attracted the attention of the people of the demon god realm. The people of the demon god realm, who did not react when so many people were killed, this time, because of the death of the fifth prince, their morale was greatly damaged. As for Yi Xian, he'd finally become their greatest enemy. The second round of battle ended quickly. However, this time, the demon god realm was clearly in an advantageous position, but the Kunlun god realm equalized. At this time, both sides were left with 50 people. In other words, in this round, the Kunlun god realm lost 34 people, while the enemy lost 50 people. However, in this round, it was rare to see a heavily injured person who was defeated but did not die. Without a moment's rest, the third round began. However, it was obvious that in this round, the enemy had already placed their focus on Yi Xian. Even when their leader was fighting, he was still carefully observing Yi Xian. When Yi Xian entered the field, the enemy sent out a guy with the title of a warrior. Moreover, he had a special ability to strengthen his physique, and he had mastered some kind of law power that was beneficial for defense. This showed that they wanted to use this opportunity to observe Yi Xian. Chapter 2377. Translator, Atlas Studios Editor. Atlas Studios. The final round. Yi Xian's mastery of the power of laws was beyond the imagination of the people from the demon god's domain. Moreover, Yi Xian had only used the devouring power of law and the godly bow to kill his enemies. 135-7924? 6810 GGGGGD. What could they possibly find out? In the next few rounds, the enemies were clearly testing Yi Xian. Those who fought against Yi Xian were not strong at all. Until the fifth round. In the fifth round, there were only 6 people left from the demon god's domain, and 4 from the Kunlun god's domain. After all, there was only one Yi Xian. Overall, it was a battle between first-grade godly kings. In the end, the people from the demon god's domain had the upper hand. Those who failed once would not have a second chance. After all, even if they survived, they would be severely injured and would not be able to fight at all. 4 against 6. How could the people from the demon god's domain shamelessly suggest a battle royale? Yi Xian's team leader was not stupid. Naturally, he did not agree. Re-1R. However, what Yi Xian did not expect was that the enemies would use some kind of secret technique to swap out 3 people from Yi Xian's team. Exchanging injuries for death. Exchanging mutual destruction. There were many elixirs and secret techniques that could temporarily increase one's battle strength. The demon god's domain had them as well. However, even the lowest level of true god realm would not use it casually. Because once they used such elixirs or secret techniques, it would be equivalent to destroying their own future. This was the main reason why almost no one in the realm of the gods used elixirs or secret techniques that could increase one's strength. But this time, the people from the demon god's domain used them. They chose 3 people and used some kind of secret technique that neither Yi Xian nor the people from the Kunlun god's domain knew about. At the cost of heavy injuries, they exchanged for the last 3 people from the Kunlun god's domain. As a result, in the final round, Yi Xian had no choice but to face 3 opponents alone. It was obvious that these 3 people were the strongest experts that the demon god's domain had deliberately left behind. These 3 people had been left behind by the demon god's domain until now specifically to deal with Yi Xian. Such an action was perhaps a little illogical and incomprehensible in the Kunlun divine region. But in the demon god domain, it was nothing. Everything was for the sake of victory. As long as they could achieve victory in the end, the people of the demon god domain did not care what methods they used. Lord Law Envoy, are you confident? Why don't we just give up? Suddenly, the leader said to Yi Xian. Yi Xian frowned slightly. This was the main god's battle ring. How could the leader say that he was going to give up? Did Yi Xian mishear? What do you mean? Yi Xian asked the leader. In reply to Lord Law Envoy, Lord Divine Master has said that if there is no chance of victory, you are to give up. Lord Divine Master will pardon you. After all, you are a law envoy of the Kunlun divine region. You have limitless room for growth. There is no need for you to risk your life against these low-rank one-god kings. Mealy actually said something like that? Yi Xian was stunned. In Yi Xian's heart, although Meili had always taken good care of him, for the sake of the Kunlun divine region, Meili was someone who would sacrifice anyone. Forget Yi Xian, even for me or for the Kunlun divine region, Meili would choose to give up. Could it be that Yi Xian was mistaken? Meili was actually someone who cared about others? Otherwise, why would she say that Yi Xian should give up if he was no match for them? Yi Xian did not know, and had no way of knowing. How could Yi Xian guess Meili's thoughts? But at least, Yi Xian was very satisfied that Meili could say something like that. Who was Meili? She was the divine master of the Kunlun divine region. A single word from her could cause the deaths of hundreds of millions of people. In the Kunlun divine region, she had absolute authority and was the strongest person in the Kunlun divine region. Yet, she was taking such special care of Yi Xian. If Yi Xian was still not satisfied, then he was not content. No need. I am willing to fight. Of course, if I really can't win, I will choose to give up. Yi Xian said directly to the leader. Since Meili was treating Yi Xian with sincerity, Yi Xian would naturally use his own actions to prove that Meili had not misjudged him. 5 eternal points were Yi Xian's trump card. In front of an absolute domain, none of these people were a match for Yi Xian. Therefore, Yi Xian was not afraid. Yi Xian had plenty of options. Hearing Yi Xian's words, the leader naturally did not insist. After all, the Master God's arena was equally important. If he could win, that would be the best choice. Yi Xian walked directly into the arena. This time, he would face 3 super geniuses in turns. These 3 geniuses from the demon god's domain had been chosen to face Yi Xian from the very beginning. Human brat. Remember my name. The person who will kill you is Myriad Demon Valley's Guku. Yi Xian's first opponent went up. This person showed incomparable confidence the moment he came up. Of course, he did have the qualifications to be so confident, because this guy was actually a supreme genius who had the title of supremacy. Moreover, he had mastered a special law, the Eternal Life Law. The Eternal Life Law was a law power that was rarer than the Dark Night Law, the Time Law, and other laws. It could be said that if someone were to calculate the rarity of laws, the Eternal Life Law would be ranked in the top 100 rare laws at the very least. Mastering the Eternal Life Law was equivalent to mastering immortality. There was almost no power that could kill such a person because the power of his laws was immortality. At the same time, once one mastered this law, regardless of their aptitude, they would be considered an absolute genius. This was because they had a lot of time. What others spent 10,000 years to do, they could spend 100,000 years or even 1,000,000 years. This was because they were immortal. To them, there was no need to pay attention to time. Of course, the law of immortality was not really that easy to grasp. It was simply impossible to truly achieve immortality. The Eternal Life Law meant that almost no power could kill him, but it did not mean that there was absolutely no power that could kill him. Human brat, die. Guku attacked Yi Xian as soon as he entered the arena. He did not use any power. It was purely a physical attack. Boom. Yi Xian waved his hand casually and sent Guku flying. It could be said that he could not withstand a single blow. However, Guku quickly got up and appeared in front of Yi Xian in an instant. This guy did not only possess the Eternal Life Law, but also the Space Law. Every time Yi Xian attacked, he would be repelled. However, this guy did not care at all. After all, he was immortal. Sometimes, he would even commit suicide and immediately return to his peak state. The shameless Eternal Life Law coupled with the Space Law was simply shameless to the extreme. He could grind his opponent to death. Chapter 2378. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation unable to devour. Moreover, Guku's attack power was also quite strong because he had completely given up on defense. It could be said that he was fighting with his life on the line. Therefore, each of his attacks could be said to be an all-out attack. Naturally, its power was not weak. 135, 7924? 6810 GGGGGD. For a moment, Yi Xian was also a little flustered. When faced with such a helpless combination of laws, it could be said that even those who were at a higher level than him would be helpless. Wei Zhentian controlled the 2 Godslayer swords to revolve around Yi Xian. It could be said that he was in a constant state of battle. This was because Guku's attacks did not give him any time to react. In an instant, in the eyes of an outsider, Yi Xian was surrounded by countless attacks. It was as if Gu-Ku had turned into thousands of incarnations and completely surrounded Yi Xian. Damn it, this guy is too difficult to deal with. I can't let this go on. I have to think of a way to get out. In the beginning, Yi Xian had continuously used his spiritual sense to control and the 6 syllables mantra to kill Gu-Ku. However, Yi Xian had already given up. This was because even if he killed this guy, it would be useless. With the law of immortality, Gu-Ku would not need too long to resurrect immediately and then attack Yi Xian with full strength. Therefore, Yi Xian was now coordinating with the God-Slayer swords and directly entering a defensive state. System. Can I devour the law of immortality? Yi Xian was quite envious of the law of immortality. If Yi Xian had such a law, wouldn't he be invincible? Unfortunately, the system's answer made Yi Xian feel quite disappointed. Ding. System notification. The host currently does not meet the requirements to forcibly devour the law of immortality. Therefore, the host cannot forcibly devour it. Of course, although he was a little disappointed, Yi Xian had also guessed that this would be the result. After all, the law of immortality was too rare. Obviously, forcibly devouring it was not omnipotent. Yi Xian had encountered all kinds of law powers before, but there were not many that could be forcibly devoured. Then system, if I want to forcibly devour this law of immortality, what are the conditions? Ding! System notification. If the host wishes to forcibly devour a rare law of nature, the host must already possess a similar law of nature. At the same time, the target's law proficiency must also reach a certain level before forcibly devouring can be activated. So that was how it was. Perhaps for Yi Xian, he could find a so-called similar law power on his own, but Yi Xian could not control the law proficiency of his enemies. However, this also indirectly showed how powerful and rare the law of immortality was. Since it was impossible to forcefully devour him, Yi Xian could only think of a way to get rid of this guy. System, analyze the weakness of the law of immortality. I need an effective plan to deal with this guy. Ding. System notification. Host does not have enough resources, unable to analyze the plan. Yi Xian was slightly taken aback. He had forgotten that he had just cleared all his resources. It seemed that he could not rely on the system this time. Gu-Ku had the law of immortality, so it was impossible to effectively kill him. Moreover, this guy also had the law of space, so he could attack quickly. It could be said that his attacks were endless. If Yi Xian ignored him, he would continue to attack Yi Xian. However, if Yi Xian killed him, he would immediately revive and attack again, controlling Gu-Ku's injuries and making him lose his ability to fight? On the surface, this seemed to be a solution, but Yi Xian had already tried it, and it did not work. This guy did not have to worry about death, so he would even kill himself to recover his strength. Therefore, restricting his ability to move was not a solution. Moreover, this was an arena battle. Even if Yi Xian used his spiritual sense to temporarily control him, it would not solve the problem. After all, even if he controlled him, it would be useless if he could not kill him. Permanent control seemed to be a solution, but to permanently control Gu-Ku, because of Gu-Ku's special law ability, he would need a terrifying 100 devour points. Where would Yi Xian get 100 devour points from? This was 100 devour points, not 100 faith points. It was not an exaggeration to say that 100 devour points was an astronomical figure to Yi Xian. Yi Xian could not do anything about it. Therefore, the idea of permanent control was not feasible at all. What other solutions were there? Absolute Zero? Absolute Zero could seal Gu-Ku in ice, but it couldn't seal him in ice forever. Once the time was up, he would be able to jump around again. Therefore, Absolute Zero was not a solution. What should he do? How could he deal with this guy? Could it be that Yi Xian could only use that move? The Devour Space. That's right, this guy had a special ability. He could not kill or control him, but once Yi Xian absorbed him into the Devour Space, no matter how many tricks he had, he would not be able to do anything. However, directly absorbing him into the Devour Space would undoubtedly cause great damage to the Devour Space. Yi Xian did not want the Devour Space to be damaged. After all, the Devour Space was damaged the last time and had not fully recovered yet. Suddenly, Yi Xian had a flash of inspiration. The Devour Space was Yi Xian's dominion over everything. And with the law ability, he could use the ability of a domain. Yi Xian did not have a fixed domain that he could use now.
However, if the demon god clan could create their own divine ability domain, why couldn't Yi Xian create something of his own? Eternal Night Domain. Suddenly, Yi Xian used the Eternal Night Domain that he had just devoured not long ago. With Goku's ability, he could indeed commit suicide and ask the Eternal Night Domain for help. However, suicide was not a joke, so Goku would not commit suicide for no reason. Yi Xian had enough time to execute his plan. The Law Divine Bow suddenly appeared in Yi Xian's hands. What was Yi Xian trying to do? Even if he used the Law Divine Bow, he would not be able to kill Goku. In that case, what was the use of Yi Xian taking out the Law Divine Bow? 6 syllables mantra, compound. The compound mantra copied a specific target. Yi Xian had used this move before and even obtained a law. However, this time, Yi Xian was not using it to devour the law, because he could not devour it either. However, a mirror image that also had the ability to revive infinitely could buy time for Yi Xian. What was Yi Xian trying to do? System. Begin refining one of the 10 great ancient talismans, the Divine Puppet Talisman. It was actually refining one of the 10 great ancient talismans. Chapter 2379. The Green Rock Pavilion no longer existed. When the Lord of the Divine Monkey Mansion heard this, he was slightly shocked. However, the Divine Monkey Mansion could also destroy the Green Rock Pavilion, so this wasn't much. However, Yi Xian and the others weren't even great saints. What qualifications did they have to destroy the Green Rock Pavilion? How did you do it? The Lord of the Divine Monkey Mansion couldn't help but ask. You don't need to know how we did it. The reason I helped you was because I didn't want your Divine Monkey Mansion to be destroyed. I have some things to ask you. As Yi Xian spoke, he glanced at Patian and said, I wonder if you've heard of the Divine Monkey Palace of the 12 Divine Beasts Palace? 12 Divine Beasts Palace. Divine Monkey Palace. Hearing this, the Lord of the Divine Monkey Mansion trembled and said, I've never heard of it. Of course, he'd heard of it, but Yi Xian's origins were unknown, so he wouldn't tell Yi Xian. Yi Xian's eyes lit up as he looked at the Lord of the Divine Monkey Mansion's minute movements. It seemed that the Lord of the Divine Monkey Mansion knew something. Divine Monkey Palace, Divine Monkey Mansion. These names were very similar. In addition, the Lord of the Divine Monkey Mansion also knew the Heaven Shocking Rod technique, so Yi Xian guessed that the other party had a 90% chance of knowing about the Divine Monkey Palace. Mansion Lord, you're not being kind. I helped you resolve the crisis and only asked you about one thing, but you're not willing to tell me? Yi Xian narrowed his eyes. I didn't ask you for help. Moreover, I don't know what the 12 Divine Beasts Palace and the Divine Monkey Palace are. The Lord of the Divine Monkey Mansion shook his head. Is that so? The corner of Yi Xian's mouth slightly curled up as he said, Mansion Lord, don't blame me for not reminding you. If I can destroy the Green Rock Pavilion, then I can naturally destroy your Divine Monkey Mansion. Don't make a mistake. With just you? The expression of the Divine Monkey Mansion's Mansion Lord suddenly turned cold. The Divine Monkey Mansion was the strongest in this area. Only they could bully others, so how could anyone else dare to threaten him? Even when facing the Green Rock Pavilion, the Rainbow Sect, and the Extreme City, the Divine Monkey Mansion's Mansion Lord didn't show any signs of fear. What's more, Yi Xian and the others weren't even at the saint level. However, his intuition told him that Yi Xian and the others weren't simple. After all, the one who spoke was Yi Xian and not the Blackhorn Saint. What the Divine Monkey Mansion Lord cared about the most was the armored mini-monkey on Yi Xian's shoulder. Blazing Sun Sage. Go up and meet them. The Divine Monkey Mansion Lord suddenly said. Yes, sir. A red-haired monkey answered and walked out. Patian also understood that it was time for him to appear, so he walked out. Are you sure you want to fight me? I'm afraid I'll beat you to death with a single strike. The Blazing Sun Sage said. Squeak squeak? Then try smashing me to death. Seeing the mocking expression on Potion's face, the Scorching Sun Sage brandished his long red stick and mercilessly swung it at Patian. Crack! This attack landed accurately on Potion's body. However, it was blocked by the Mystic Divine Battle Armor first. It only caused the Mystic Divine Battle Armor to crack. The Mystic Divine Battle Armor was formed by Wei Zhentian. Wei Zhentian was now an 8th grade half-saint like Patian. Plus, it was a 3rd grade magical treasure, so its defense was very strong.
The attack of the blazing sun sage couldn't even break the defense of the mystic divine battle armor, let alone Potian.
What? How is this possible? My attack couldn't even break his armor?
The scorching sun great sage was shocked. Among the 4 great saints of the divine monkey mansion, his attack power was the strongest. Plus, he had condensed hundreds of vital monkey hairs. His strength was even stronger than a second-grade great saint. However, this was... Squeak! It's my turn! Just as the blazing sun great sage was overwhelmed with shock, Potian made his move at lightning speed. 36 staff strikes. Pang! The strike landed on the body of the blazing sun sage, causing his shoulder to collapse. This wasn't the main point. The main point was that Potian didn't use his full strength. He only used about 30% of his strength. Even if it was only 30% of his strength, it was enough to kill the blazing sun sage in a second. If it hit his chest just now, his heart would definitely burst.
So strong.
The whole crowd was shocked. The blazing sun sage's eyes widened. He had smelled the aura of death just now. He didn't expect death to be so close to him. He knew that Potian had held back. Otherwise, he would have been smashed into minced meat. Terrifying. This was simply too terrifying. Was he really just an 8th stage half-saint? Gulp. The other 3 great sages, as well as the lord of the divine monkey clan, gulped. This strength was probably even stronger than the mansion master of the divine monkey prefecture. Where did this little monkey come from? The mansion master of the divine monkey prefecture was stunned. He estimated his opponent's strength. If they attacked together, they might stand a chance. Go! Capture him! The mansion master of the divine monkey prefecture shouted. In the next moment, the other 3 great sages joined forces with the mansion master of the divine monkey prefecture and charged toward Potian.
You overestimate yourself.
Yi Xian snorted coldly and gave an order to Potian. Potian, who was already an 8th stage saint, had even killed the pavilion master of the Green Rock Pavilion. Moreover, when he arrived at the divine monkey prefecture, his cultivation level had increased once again. In front of him, these people were no different from the pavilion master of the Green Rock Pavilion. 36 strikes of the heavens. Soon, the battle was over. Including the mansion master of the divine monkey prefecture, they were all defeated. Black Horn devour. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Yi Xian quickly gave the order. The mansion master of the divine monkey prefecture fell to the ground with heavy injuries. Before he could react, the monkey soldiers and generals were devoured by Black Horn and sent to the cultivation space. This was a huge fortune. With so many monkey soldiers and generals, there was at least a strand of monkey hair. Who are you? The mansion master of the divine monkey prefecture couldn't help but ask as he watched the monkey soldiers and generals that he had painstakingly nurtured being devoured by Black Horn. If you had answered my question earlier, you wouldn't have ended up like this. But don't worry, these people are not dead. They are very safe. Yi Xian grinned. The cultivation space was indeed very safe. However, after those monkey soldiers and generals were sent in, their life monkey hairs were directly plucked out. At the same time, Potian was also taken in by Yi Xian, then quickly summoned out. At this moment, the number of life monkey hairs on Potion's body had already reached 1,000. Although Yi Xian had obtained far more than 1,000 life monkey hairs, Potion's current realm wasn't high enough. At most he could refine 1,000. As long as he continued to break through, he could continue refining them. This wasn't the main point. The main point was that these monkey soldiers and generals would be Potion's backyard army in the future. Yi Xian had them continuously condense life monkey hairs and then give them to Potian. Since that's the case, then take me in as well. The divine monkey prefecture master said. All right, as you wish. Chapter 2380. In this way, these people would be at Yi Xian's mercy, and there wouldn't be a divine monkey palace in the future. Immediately, Yi Xian projected himself into the cultivation space and appeared in front of the divine monkey palace lord. Now, can we have a good chat? Yi Xian said to the divine monkey palace lord. I have indeed heard of the divine monkey palace you mentioned. The divine monkey palace lord nodded and said, however, I heard it from my father. Your father is? Yi Xian asked. This divine monkey palace was established by my father, and it is said that my father was once a monkey soldier of the divine monkey palace. The divine monkey palace lord replied. Your father is a monkey soldier of the Divine Monkey Palace. Then why did he leave the Divine Monkey Palace? Yi Xian asked again. The Divine Monkey Palace Lord said, that's because the 12 Divine Beast Palaces were destroyed. The 12 Palace Masters either died in battle, disappeared, or were sealed. As a result, the 12 Divine Beast Palaces were also disbanded. Was it destroyed? Yi Xian muttered in his heart. Then what about your father? My father's life was once saved by the Divine Monkey Palace Lord, so he wanted to go to the Immortal Treasure Mountain to save the Divine Monkey Palace Lord. The Divine Monkey Palace Lord said. Immortal Treasure Mountain? Hearing this name, Yi Xian suddenly thought of a person. It was the middle-aged man with horns who forcefully took away the World Annihilation Ghost Dragon. The other party had also mentioned the Immortal Treasure Mountain. So that was the place where the Divine Monkey Palace Lord was sealed. Then where is this Immortal Treasure Mountain? Yi Xian asked curiously. The Divine Monkey Palace Lord shook his head and said, I'm not sure either. Perhaps the mysterious Great Sage will know. Great Sage? Who is it? Yi Xian asked. The Great Sage is said to be a person of great status in the Divine Monkey Palace. After the 12 Divine Beasts Palace was disbanded, he hid in the Thousand Spiders Mountain as a hidden expert. My father found out the location of the Immortal Treasure Mountain from him. The Divine Monkey Palace Lord paused for a moment, then said, I don't know the location of the Immortal Treasure Mountain, but I do know where the Thousand Spiders Mountain is. With that, he took out a map and handed it to Yi Xian, pointing out the location of the Thousand Spiders Mountain. Thousand Spiders Mountain? Yi Xian's eyes narrowed slightly. This place was quite a distance away from him. Even if he used the teleportation formation continuously, it would still take him more than 10 days. However, this was nothing. At least he found a clue. Immediately, Yi Xian directly set off for the Thousand Spiders Mountain. This journey was extremely boring. They didn't encounter anything special, only a few groups of bandits who thought that Yi Xian was easy to bully. These people were either dead or sent into the cultivation space by Yi Xian. About half a month later, Yi Xian arrived at the foot of the Thousand Spiders Mountain. During this period of time, Yi Xian broke through to the 7th level of the Half-Saint Realm, and Patian broke through from the 8th level of the Half-Saint Realm to the 2nd level of the Saint Realm. Yi Xian had already learned of the dangers of the Thousand Spiders Mountain on the way here. It was said that even a mid-level Great Saint would be in danger of dying there. As for the master of the Thousand Spiders Mountain, she was called Madame Thousand Spiders. She was the wife of the Great Saint. Rumor had it that if someone could find the Thousand Spiders Hall, they would be able to obtain the legacy of the Great Saint. This staff technique was extremely powerful, so it attracted many people to climb the mountain. Yi Xian looked at the Thousand Spiders Mountain that was constantly emitting a terrifying aura. After taking a deep breath of air, he ascended the mountain. It was impossible to fly on the Thousand Spiders Mountain because there were a large number of Great Saint-level flying thunder spiders in the air. Once they flew, they would be attacked by these flying thunder spiders. Therefore they had to go up on foot. Yi Xian brought Blackhorn and walked in. Blackhorn was now a 9th stage saint. His strength had already surpassed the Mansion Lord of the Divine Monkey Mansion. He was roughly at the 5th grade Great Saint level. With him leading the way, there wouldn't be any small problems. These people who ascended the mountain were at least intermediate saint level. However, it was rare for them to bring a burden like Blackhorn up. The Thousand Spiders Mountain is filled with spider-type saint beasts. With the 10,000 beast diagram and the heaven splitter, the chances of reaching the top are very high. Yi Xian thought. Even if he couldn't, he could just use time to go back and wait for a while to come in. Brat, a mere 9th grade saint dares to come in? You're really impatient. Not long after Yi Xian and Blackhorn left, a discordant voice sounded. They turned their heads and saw a few 4th grade great saints. Swallow it, Yi Xian said directly when he saw that the other party had ill intentions. The next moment, Blackhorn turned into a devouring black dragon. He opened his big mouth and sucked the few 4th grade great saints into the planting space. Overestimating themselves. Yi Xian wasn't surprised by this kind of people. Blackhorn was already used to it. They continued to climb the mountain. Along the way, many great saint-level saint beasts attacked them, but they were all devoured by Blackhorn without exception. As they continued to climb the Thousand Spiders Mountain, the realm of the saint beasts they encountered also increased. In less than 2 days, They came to the mountainside of the Thousand Spiders Mountain. They were almost halfway up the mountain. Next, we may encounter high-level saint beasts. We have to be careful, Yi Xian thought. However, just as they continued to move forward, a figure suddenly flew up to the sky. There was actually someone who wanted to fly to the top of the mountain. He was really courting death. Zizizi. When the flying thunder spiders in the sky discovered the figure, they immediately released countless lightning bolts and attacked this person. To everyone's surprise, this figure's speed was quite fast, and he actually dodged this batch of attacks. Yi Xian hurriedly looked and found that it was a girl in her teens. Her strength had already reached the 5th grade Great Saint level. However, the flying thunder spiders in the sky were basically in groups, and they constantly attacked this girl. Although the girl's speed was fast, she couldn't dodge so many attacks. In the end, she was still hit, but she didn't die. Instead, she fell from the sky. However, those flying thunder spiders didn't intend to let her go. They immediately took advantage of the situation and attacked. What a blessing, Blackhorn swallowed her, Yi Xian immediately said. When Blackhorn heard this, he immediately transformed into his original body. He opened his mouth, and a wave of power enveloped the girl, then swallowed her. The Thousand Spider Mountain had already been climbed by countless people. Although these flying thunder spiders were terrifying, as long as they didn't exceed a certain distance from the ground, they wouldn't attack. After Blackhorn swallowed the girl into the planting space, those flying thunder spiders lost their target and gave up on chasing. Hey, where is this? In the planting space, the girl turned her head and looked around. She couldn't help but ask. This is my space, I saved you. Yi Xian suddenly appeared in front of the girl. Of course, it was just a projection. Chapter 2381. However, just as the myriad Sun sword attendant appeared, he was struck by a ray of light. If Yi Xian hadn't reacted in time and helped him withstand a portion of the damage, it could be said that this little fellow would have already been killed. Damn it! Yi Xian had no choice but to recall Sword Attendant Wan Sun. 135-7924? 6810 GGGGGD. This was because even if Sword Attendant Wan Sun appeared, it would not be able to do anything to Yi Xian. Absolute Zero. Yi Xian activated Absolute Zero several times based on his intuition. Unfortunately, it was useless. The enemy's strange attack was not interrupted at all. Human brat. Do you think you can find me? Accept your death obediently. Accept your death obediently under my dance of troubled times. A voice sounded. The enemy had finally spoken, but Yi Xian could not sense where the enemy was speaking. It was as if the enemy was everywhere. The law bow appeared in Yi Xian's hands. Yi Xian continuously shot law arrows, but unfortunately, they were useless. These law arrows were shot randomly. How could they be a threat to the enemy? Eternal Night Domain. Yi Xian activated the Eternal Night Domain several times, but it was still useless. To think that the enemy this time was so strange. What kind of special law power did he control? Or did he have some special treasure? Why could not even Yi Xian discover his position? It was not only Yi Xian but also the system. Yi Xian had ordered the system to detect him, but it kept failing. Ding! System notification. Target detection failed. Ding! System notification. Target detection failed. Only the sound of failure could be heard. Yi Xian was attacked time and time again. If not for Yi Xian's eternal body's powerful recovery ability, Yi Xian would have been defeated. However, even so, the clothes rack on Yi Xian's body had already been scrapped. At this moment, Yi Xian actually appeared to be in a somewhat sorry state. This was something that had never happened before. But there was nothing Yi Xian could do. No matter what, if Yi Xian wanted to defeat the enemy, the biggest prerequisite was to find the enemy. Otherwise, if he couldn't even attack, how could he defeat the enemy? Was he going to use his eternal domain now? No, he couldn't use it. From the enemy's abilities, Yi Xian already knew that the last 3 enemies would only get stronger and stronger. Those from the demon god's domain were also determined to win the Master God battle ring. Therefore, the final enemy was the final trump card that the people of the demon god domain had prepared. The eternal domain had to be kept. It was Yi Xian's last and greatest trump card. Damn it! Yi Xian felt like he was at his wit's end. All of his attacks were completely useless because he couldn't find the enemy. On the other hand, the enemy was able to continuously attack Yi Xian. They were simply taking a beating. The wings of gods didn't have the power of the wings of gods, so Yi Xian couldn't enter stealth mode. At this moment, Yi Xian even missed the ancient Zither Dharma power. Back then, Yi Xian had directly used the ancient Zither Dharma power against that person from the Leaf family in the Divine Master Palace. Yi Xian couldn't wait to have another Dharma power. Unfortunately, although the bloodline of Wan Zun could contain countless Dharma powers, Yi Xian only had the ancient Zither Dharma power. What could he do to force the enemy out? Yi Xian's mind raced as he dodged without stopping for a moment. But even as he dodged, he would still be attacked from time to time. Outside the battle ring, the team leader and the others were paying close attention to Yi Xian. Yi Xian's victory or defeat was the final result of this first-grade Divine King battle ring. Once Yi Xian lost, the Kunlun God domain would announce their defeat. Was Yi Xian's attack power weak? Not at all. It could be said that if this enemy dared to appear in front of Yi Xian, even if it was just a second, Yi Xian would be able to kill him in a second. But now, Yi Xian couldn't even find the enemy, so how could he kill him in a second? 1,000 vines! Yi Xian roared again. 1,000 vines exploded instantly, and countless vines grew crazily. This time, Yi Xian wanted to use the endless growth of 1,000 vines to find the enemy. Unfortunately, 1,000 vines' defense was too weak. Every single ray of light that appeared would sever countless vines. Even Qian Tang could not hold on for long. How could Qian Ting possibly endure the endless cutting of his vines? Hence, Qian Tang helplessly retreated after a short while. Looking at the scattered vines on the ground, Yi Xian was filled with helplessness. Suddenly, Yi Xian's gaze stopped on those scattered vines. Re-1R because Yi Xian's sharp senses told him that there was an area with a lot more vines. Why would there be so many vines in a single area? There was no doubt that this was the enemy's position. Yi Xian didn't believe that this guy could control space after mastering the 3 major abilities of concealment, music, and summoning. Megatron, strongest attack mode. Yi Xian thought, and Megatron launched a frenzied attack in that direction. Yi Xian didn't stay idle either. With the Godslayer in hand, he also launched countless attacks. Violent and concentrated attacks were launched in that direction. In an instant, those rays of light stopped attacking. It's there. The enemy is there. Yi Xian drew his bowstring even faster, and from time to time, he would use various abilities, such as the Eternal Night Domain and Absolute Zero. Yi Xian couldn't determine the enemy's exact position, but he could at least estimate the approximate range. Hence, Yi Xian launched a saturation attack in that direction. In an instant, that area within a 10,000-mile radius was engulfed by Yi Xian's frenzied attacks. Within a 10,000-mile radius, there were countless attacks. Yi Xian didn't hesitate at all. As long as he sensed something, Yi Xian didn't hesitate or pause, even if it seemed like all his attacks had missed. A voice sounded, and a figure appeared. "You, how did you discover me?" At this moment, that person was in an incomparably sorry state. After all, his defense was simply insufficient. Adding on the fact that he didn't grasp the space laws or the speed laws, it was impossible for him to dodge Yi Xian's saturated attacks. Hence, he revealed his true form under the attack of the deicide slash. Since he had appeared, Yi Xian wouldn't hold back. All of his attacks were launched in that person's direction. This time it was a clear kill. This guy's fate was sealed when Yi Xian forced him to reveal his true form. How did he discover him? Yi Xian could only say that it was a fluke. Furthermore, he had to thank his enemy for revealing himself. Yi Xian had discovered his enemy because of the countless vines on the ground. This guy had exposed himself when he cut the vines. It wasn't Yi Xian who had discovered him. Chapter 2382. Yi Xian won another round, but it was by sheer luck. 135-7924? 6810 GGGGGD. It could be said that whether it was Yi Xian himself or the other spectators, they all felt that Yi Xian's victory this time was not due to strength, but due to luck. This was because anyone could tell that Yi Xian had not actually gained the upper hand all this while. It was the enemy who gave Yi Xian the chance to win. Of course, no matter what, a win was a win. Even if it was luck, luck was still a part of strength. Re-1 rat this time, Yi Xian was defending the arena alone. There was still one last battle left. The final battle would determine the final result of this battle. Clearly, that person from the demon god domain was not going to give Yi Xian any time to rest. With a leap, that person had already arrived at the arena. Yi Xian silently looked at that person. From this person, Yi Xian could feel a strong pressure. Yi Xian understood that this person was no ordinary person. They were merely divine kings, and the most they could do was to borrow the power of laws. However, this person was able to emit the pressure of laws. This was enough to prove that he was special. Of course, no matter how strong he was, only death awaited him today. Because Yi Xian had left the eternal domain behind for so long, wasn't it all for now? No matter how strong he was, Yi Xian would definitely crush him. That person walked into the arena with a cold expression. He looked at Yi Xian indifferently and said, "I'll give you a chance to understand it yourself." Yi Xian raised his eyebrows slightly. This person was very confident, but he didn't know where his confidence came from. System, detect this person's strength. Ding. System notification. Target is a first-grade Venerable Realm Divine King. Ding. Warning. 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 Host, please take note. The designated target possesses a special ability. Divine ability augmentation? What did that mean? However, Yi Xian couldn't be bothered to care so much. This guy had the title of Venerable Rank, so he was indeed very powerful. Furthermore, he was able to emit the pressure of laws, which was enough to prove that he was extraordinary. But so what? Is that so? In that case, I'll return those words back to you. Kill yourself. Perhaps you'll suffer less. Yi Xian said to that person with a faint smile on his face. Human brat. You are very arrogant. Has no one ever told you that being too arrogant will result in a miserable death? That person still had a cold expression on his face, but Yi Xian scoffed at his words. The current situation was that guy being arrogant, not Yi Xian. As he spoke, he began to condense a black ball in his hand. However, lightning constantly flashed around the black ball. The laws of devour and lightning. He was actually able to perfectly fuse the power of the two laws together to form a new form of attack. Yi Xian couldn't help but be slightly stunned. This person was very strong. Even though Yi Xian had many different laws, he had always used one law at a time as a means of attack. Yi Xian had never seen someone like this, who was actually able to fuse two laws together to attack. That person casually waved his hand, and the black ball suddenly rushed towards Yi Xian. Yi Xian had no choice but to use the power of the space law to continuously dodge. Yi Xian was extremely fast. After all, the speed of unlimited teleportation allowed him to travel thousands of miles in the blink of an eye. However, even with such a fast speed, Yi Xian still couldn't escape the attack of the black ball. At that moment, Yi Xian could clearly feel a strong suction force coming from beside him. Yi Xian, who also possessed the law of devour, naturally knew what kind of power this was. In the distance, bolts of powerful lightning continuously bombarded Yi Xian. In other words, if Yi Xian was attracted by this suction force, he would definitely die. Stop struggling, human brat. Accept your death obediently. You are no match for me. The genius from the demon race's celestial realm said faintly, as if everything was already under his control. Yi Xian frowned slightly but didn't hesitate. Since he knew that he couldn't do anything to this person using conventional methods, there was no need for Yi Xian to waste any more time. System, what if I use 5 eternal points to activate the eternal domain? Ding. System notification. Exchange successful. Following the system's words, a ray of light suddenly erupted from Yi Xian's body and spread out in an instant. Then, a huge sphere appeared in the middle of the arena. This sphere was so huge that it directly enveloped all the geniuses from the demon race's celestial realm. A strong power instantly entered Yi Xian's body, increasing all his attributes by 100 times. This made Yi Xian feel as if he had the power to dominate everything. At the very least, this genius from the demon race's celestial realm could no longer threaten Yi Xian. That strong suction force continued, but Yi Xian didn't care at all. Instead, he smiled and allowed his body to be attracted to it. The lightning surrounded Yi Xian in an instant and bombarded him continuously. The strong light made Yi Xian completely disappear. After a moment, the genius from the demon race's celestial realm actually said to the referee in the sky, "Why? Are you guys still not going to decide the result? The underlying meaning of this sentence couldn't be more obvious. He was certain that Yi Xian had been killed by his lightning. However, none of the powerhouses paid any attention to him. Instead, they all looked at the center of the lightning with fear in their eyes. It was fear. These powerhouses saw a scene that they couldn't comprehend. At this moment, Yi Xian was indeed being attacked by countless lightning bolts. Some of these lightning bolts had the power to instantly kill a first-grade divine king. However, all of these lightning bolts didn't threaten Yi Xian in the slightest. In defense, Yi Xian seemed to be immune to the lightning bolts. No, it wasn't as simple as being immune. Yi Xian actually waved his hand casually and caught one of the lightning bolts in his hand. Then, he studied it with great interest. He had actually forcefully taken the enemy's attack technique into his own hands. Furthermore, he didn't care about it at all. What's wrong? The genius from the demon race's celestial realm naturally knew what had happened when he saw the reaction of the judges. Therefore, he subconsciously looked in Yi Xian's direction. But then, he saw a scene that terrified him to the core. The black sphere that he had just thrown out was actually being rapidly restored by Yi Xian. Furthermore, as the process continued, the genius from the demon race's celestial realm could clearly sense that the black sphere was completely out of his control. A moment later, the black sphere was floating in Yi Xian's hand. Meanwhile, Yi Xian was still studying it. Chapter 2383. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. The genius from the demon god realm was horrified. How was this possible? His attack had been played around with by his opponent. One had to know that that was his most powerful attack. Not only had it failed to hurt Yi Xian, but it had also been tamed by Yi Xian. 135-7924? 6810 GGGGGD, that was the power of two different laws. How could it have been tamed? For a time, that person was in disarray because such a strange scene had exceeded the limits of his imagination. How did you do it? The genius from the demon god realm asked Yi Xian subconsciously. Unfortunately, Yi Xian didn't have any intention of paying attention to him. Instead, he casually waved his hand. The black ball that had combined the power of the devouring and lightning laws disappeared. No, this is impossible. This is an illusion. This must be an illusion. No one can break my devouring lightning ball. Impossible. Impossible. Yi Xian repeated the word impossible several times in a row, which undoubtedly revealed the fear and shock in his heart. As he cried out in alarm, a new attack was formed in his hand. However, before he could attack, Yi Xian had already appeared beside him. Yi Xian waved his hand casually and the law attack that the genius had been forming was snatched away by Yi Xian. That's right, it was snatched away. With a wave of his hand, the law attack that the genius from the demon god realm had used fell into Yi Xian's hand like a well-behaved baby. The genius from the demon god realm hurriedly retreated in horror. However, no matter how fast he was, Yi Xian would always appear beside him. Yi Xian just looked at him indifferently, but his attention was focused on the power of his laws. System, can I devour the power of the lightning laws? Ding. System notification. The host is currently in a special space. Forced devouring is not allowed. Yi Xian was slightly disappointed, but he had guessed that this was possible. All of a sudden, Yi Xian raised his head and looked at the genius from the demon god domain. Although it was just a casual glance, the genius from the demon celestial realm felt as if he had been completely locked onto by Yi Xian. It was as if his every move and action were clearly under Yi Xian's control. This feeling was really uncomfortable. Unfortunately, whether it felt good or not, this guy couldn't do anything about it. At this moment, he no longer had the confidence and arrogance from before. The demon god domain genius's eyes were filled with fear and helplessness. His body was trembling uncontrollably. Clearly, he was extremely afraid of Yi Xian. Alright, let's end this. Although the Eternal Territory was extremely powerful, it had a limited duration. Yi Xian naturally wouldn't waste any time. For Yi Xian, he had spent a total of 5 Eternal Points to exchange for the Eternal Domain. Wasn't it all to defeat this person? Pah! A slap in the face. It was actually a slap. This was a battle between godly monarchs. It was normal to use mystiques or nomological powers, but to use a slap to hit the enemy, how much pressure did it take to do so? The most important thing was the result of this slap.
Yi Xian's slap had actually shattered the demon god domain genius's godhead. A slap could actually shatter the opponent's godhead. Who had ever seen such a powerful force? This was especially so for the demon god domain genius. After being slapped by Yi Xian, he felt as if all the power that belonged to him was rapidly disappearing. To be more precise, Yi Xian had stripped him of all his power in the time it took to slap him. Whether it was nomological powers or the divine power in his body, everything had disappeared. At this moment, that person was actually a cripple. After pausing in midair for a short second, the demon god domain genius fell to the ground. The feeling of falling infinitely made the demon god realm genius scream hysterically and hysterically. Unfortunately, no one was paying attention to him anymore. Bam! Finally, he made intimate contact with the ground and fell to his death instantly. At the same time, the eternal domain's time was finally up. That violent power instantly returned to Yi Xian's body. At this moment, Yi Xian looked no different from before. However, even the referee was stunned for a moment before announcing the result. After all, the power that Yi Xian had displayed was too strong. It was so strong that even the powerful referees couldn't believe their eyes. What kind of power was this? What kind of method was this? A super genius from the demon god domain was actually like a child in front of Yi Xian. He was so powerless and so pitiful. When the result was announced, even the people fighting in the other arenas subconsciously stopped fighting. This was because the strange and powerful power that had erupted from Yi Xian had actually penetrated the space of the arena and made them feel it. Re-1R, especially those who were also lower divine kings, they were already trembling because they knew that even if they were of a higher cultivation level than Yi Xian, if Yi Xian had really fought with them, they would definitely die if Yi Xian unleashed that power just now. While Yi Xian was killing the geniuses of the demon god domain, he naturally wouldn't let go of their Qian Kuan rings. When the result was announced and confirmed that he had won, Yi Xian didn't hesitate to devour the resources in those Qian Kuan rings. Yi Xian's intention was clear. If there was a need, he would continue to fight in the next arena. Ding! The host has broken through. The current level is Lower Divine King Realm. He actually rose 3 levels? He was indeed a genius from the demon god domain. The resources in his hands were indeed abundant. However, Yi Xian didn't show it at all. This was the Overgod arena and he didn't want to cause trouble for himself. The powerhouses who noticed these changes also shut their mouths silently. Needless to say, the experts from the Kunlun divine domain weren't stupid enough to cause trouble for themselves. As for the experts from the demon god domain, they could only keep quiet because all of their lower divine king realm geniuses had been defeated. No one could fight with Yi Xian anymore. Besides, Yi Xian's sudden burst of power just now was just a level up. It couldn't be compared to the power he had just displayed. The Kunlun divine domain had won the lower divine king realm arena. After that, Yi Xian didn't have to wait for too long. The battles in the other arenas had all ended. Of course, the battle that left the deepest impression on people was Yi Xian's battle. How could they not remember that kind of overwhelming power? No one knew whether it was Yi Xian's victory that caused the other lower divine kings to feel uneasy. In short, the Kunlun divine domain had won 7 out of the 9 lower divine kings' battles. Chapter 2384. After that, the crowd was led out of the Overgod arena once more. What awaited them was Mi Li's reward. 135-7924? 6810 GGGGGD. As for what the Overgod arena was about, Yi Xian and the others didn't know, nor did they have the right to ask. Their mission was simply to obtain victory. However, these geniuses could be said to have suffered an incomparably heavy loss. Those who could return, in 100 people, less than 1 person. From this, one could see just how cruel the Overgod arena was. When they returned to the Overgod palace, they didn't receive the grand welcome they'd expected. Mi Li merely spoke a few words, and after discovering some rewards, she left it at that. Of course, these rewards were nothing to scoff at. Furthermore, the geniuses who participated in the Overgod arena would receive special nurturing from the Overgod realm. As long as they returned alive from the Overgod arena, they would receive benefits they couldn't even dream of and reach the heavens in a single bound. While the others quietly retreated to celebrate, Yi Xian was summoned by Mi Li alone. This wasn't the first time Yi Xian had been summoned by Mi Li alone. But this time, Yi Xian was a little more reserved. Yi Xian already had a clear understanding of Mi Li's authority. This was an Overgod who could send trillions of experts to their deaths with a single word.
She was the undisputed #1 expert of the Kunlun God realm.
Greetings, over God.
Yi Xian bowed slightly and stood respectfully in front of Mi Li. Mi Yi looked at Yi Xian, then lightly smiled and said, "This time, you did well. Go back and prepare well.
I'm afraid the next Lord God's arena won't be far away."
There was another Overgod arena? Yi Xian was already scared out of his wits after playing the Overgod arena once. If he played it again, wouldn't Yi Xian lose his life? Although Yi Xian only had a slight change in his emotions, how could it possibly escape Mi Li's notice? Don't worry, the next Master God Challenge ring won't be so cruel. I called you here this time because I have a reward for you alone. I've already heard that your performance this time was the most outstanding, so you deserve this reward. At the same time, she handed a treasure box to Yi Xian. Yi Xian subconsciously took it, but he didn't know what it was. Of course, now that he was in the Divine Master Palace, he could not open it directly. Yi Xian, although your performance in the Overgod's battle arena was not bad, your expeditionary army of 9 directions and 60,000 realms was not very satisfactory. Last time, I mobilized the armies of the other regional commanders to help you. However, this does not conform to the rules of the Overgod's battle arena. You still have to work hard.
Yes, Divine Master. All right, you can leave now.
Yi Xian acknowledged and left. Yi Xian didn't feel anything when he faced Mi Li before, but recently, he clearly felt that something was different. Mi Li's aura was simply too strong, and it wasn't just her aura, but also her temperament. It was just that before, Yi Xian didn't have an official position, so Mi Li only thought of him as her master's disciple or friend. Now that Yi Xian had an official position, he finally understood Mi Li's strength. After walking out of the Divine Master Palace, Yi Xian immediately opened the box. After all, this was what he obtained after risking his life in the Overgod's battle arena. Yi Xian wanted to see what was inside the box. A token. A token that emitted a strange light. Could this be Mi Li's reward? What was the use of this thing? But soon, the moment Yi Xian opened the box, a message came out of the box and directly into Yi Xian's head. In an instant, Yi Xian understood what it was. This was the qualification token for the Kunlun God Domain's Ancestral Land Secret Realm. What was the Ancestral Land Secret Realm? When every God Domain was born, there would be a place of origin, and usually, it would be a secret realm. This secret realm would be constantly reinforced by successive divine masters, and if the super experts of the God Domain were to die, they would automatically choose to die there. It could be said that the Ancestral Land Secret Realm was the graveyard of the God Domain. It was the collective grave of the super experts of the God Domain. The experts who could walk in by themselves would naturally pass away in there. And if the experts who died in battle could be found, they would be sent in as well. It could be said that the Ancestral Land Secret Realm was the core and most mysterious place of the God Domain. And there was no need to mention the opportunities and dangers inside. Most of the experts, if they didn't have a successor in the outside world, would leave their legacy in the ancestral land. After all, only true geniuses were qualified to enter the rented land. The reason why these experts left their legacy was because they hoped that one day, their legacy would be inherited by a genius and continue to be passed down. What were the experts of the God Domain? That was the strongest power in a God Domain. Generally speaking, only those who had reached the level of Master God Emperor could enter that place. In other words, it wouldn't be too much to call the Ancestral Land Secret Realm the graveyard of the God Emperors. Now, Yi Xian was holding a token to enter the graveyard of the God Emperors. It was a special token that could only be used once. Using this token, Yi Xian could be directly transported in. When he wanted to leave, he only needed to activate the token and he would be able to leave. Although the treasure hunt in the Ancestral Land Secret Realm could not be called the best reward in the God Domain, it was still one of the top few rewards. What one could obtain would depend on one's luck. What should he do? Should he use it? Yi Xian had doubts in his heart. He didn't know how many people had obtained the qualifications to enter the Ancestral Land Secret Realm. But he believed that there wouldn't be many. In that case, should he enter now? Ri Xian looked into the distance. In the end, he decided to enter now. Power. Yi Xian was in desperate need of power now. In the past, a 4th-grade Divine King Realm Cultivator was considered pretty good. Unfortunately, he was now the provincial governor who was in charge of the 9 directions and 60,000 territories. A mere lower-grade divine king realm cultivator was nothing compared to him. Those big families under Yi Xian, although they didn't say anything on the surface, would definitely slander Yi Xian in secret. After all, the god domain was also a world where power was respected. Only the strong had the right to be respected by others. Since that was the case, then he would use it now. Yi Xian wanted to see what was so special about the ancestral land secret realm of the Kunlun god domain. Yi Xian held the token in his hand and instantly activated the teleportation. After a while, Yi Xian's figure appeared at the entrance of a secret realm. What a strange space. This was Yi Xian's first reaction. In this secret realm, there was no sunlight at all. There was only a kind of dark light. In layman's terms, it was a ghost fire. Chapter 2385. After all, those who were buried here, even the weakest ones were low-level god emperors. 135-7924? 6810 GGGGGD, not to mention inferior god emperors. Even those with divine sparks would find it difficult to destroy their corpses even if they died. Without tens of millions of years, the corpses of these experts would not decay at all. Of course, there was something special about this secret realm. There was a strange power of law everywhere in this secret realm. This power of law was completely useless because its only use was to accelerate the decay of the corpses. Of course, there were other things in the secret realm that would accelerate the decay of the corpses. At this moment, Yi Xian was standing on a circular platform. This was the reception platform. Those who entered the ancestral land secret realm using a token would appear on a platform similar to the one Yi Xian was standing on. This was because this secret realm did not have any entrances or exits. If one wanted to enter, they had to use a teleportation token. If anyone were to accidentally lose the token, they would be trapped inside and die. Yi Xian did not move. He stood silently on the reception platform and carefully observed his surroundings. Before entering this place, there was no map or any information about this secret realm. If Yi Xian wanted to explore this place, he would have to choose his own route. With the reception platform as the center, broken pieces of land could be seen everywhere. Perhaps this secret realm used to be a complete piece of land, but it was now divided into countless small pieces. These broken pieces of land were what Yi Xian wanted to explore this time. This was because some of the broken pieces of land were the tombs of the experts who entered. Not far in front of Yi Xian was a piece of land. On this land, there was a majestic palace. However, Yi Xian had no intention of exploring this place. He was so close to the reception platform. Yi Xian would not believe that there would be any inheritance left. Yi Xian did not observe for too long. No matter how he observed, he would not be able to see anything without experiencing it himself. With a leap, Yi Xian was already high up in the air. Yi Xian didn't have a specific goal in mind. Right now, he was just randomly choosing a direction. Pieces of broken land retreated from Yi Xian's side. Meanwhile, Yi Xian was constantly choosing his targets. Finally, a broken piece of land caught the attention of Yi Xian. There were no palaces on this broken continent, but there was a mysterious plant growing on it. There was not even any sunlight in the ancestral land mystery land, but there was still a plant, which was a little strange. Yi Xian landed on the broken piece of land and said to the system, "System, scan this thing. I want to see what it is." Ding. System notification. Scan successful. Target set. Ghost vine. Ding. System notification. A special plant, ghost vine, has been detected. The host can find the heart of the ghost vine to upgrade the 1,000 vines. Ding. System notification. The ghost vine is formed from the divine power and precepts of a fallen elite. It is said to be a plant, but it has its own instincts. The preliminary assessment is that it is dangerous. Please be careful. Dangerous? This was the ancestral land, the graveyard of countless elites. It would be strange if there was no danger. However, he did not expect to find something that could be used to upgrade the 1,000 vines as soon as he arrived. Naturally, Yi Xian would not miss this opportunity. The heart of the ghost vine? No matter what it was, as long as he killed the ghost vine, he would be able to find it soon. Yi Xian pulled out the Godslayer. At the same time, he let Wei Zhentian transform into a magic treasure. Then, the two Godslayer swords circled around Yi Xian, ready to defend at any time. At the same time, Yi Xian took out the Rule Heavenly Bow and held it in his hand. Thousand Beast Sword Servant. Yi Xian immediately summoned the Thousand Beast Sword Servant. He wanted to use the Thousand Beast Sword Servant to test the strength of the Ghost Vine. Following Yi Xian's order, the Thousand Beast Sword Servants summoned their divine beast mounts and rushed over without hesitation. Yi Xian stood in place and did not make any unnecessary movements. He just waited silently. The Thousand Beast Sword Servant led the divine beast mounts and charged continuously. The Ghost Vine seemed to be really ordinary plants at this time. There was no reaction at all. Of course, the system notification said that the Ghost Vine was a dangerous existence. Therefore, Yi Xian did not believe that this thing was that simple. Suddenly, a section of the Ghost Vine moved. Its speed was incomparably fast. Even though Yi Xian had used his divine sense to completely envelop the area, the only thing he could sense was that the Ghost Vine had moved a little. However, he couldn't sense what it had done because its speed was simply too fast. However, at least 10 divine beast mounts had disappeared in the blink of an eye. Yi Xian immediately gathered his divine consciousness there. After a while, he discovered that the divine beast mounts had been completely surrounded by the Ghost Vine. The Ghost Vine was like a divine snake, tightly wrapping around the Lord Divine Beast mounts. After a while, it strangled the divine beast mounts to death. As for the leveled-up mounts, they could not resist at all. What a strong defense! Yi Xian clearly saw one of the divine beast mounts viciously bite the Ghost Vine before it died. Unfortunately, it had no effect at all. This Ghost Vine actually had an incomparably strong defense. System: detect the strength of this Ghost Vine. Why is its defense so strong? Ding! System notification. Detection successful. Host: please note that the Ghost Vine has a special ability. All the Ghost Vines here are actually just one stalk. Chapter 2386. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. If the Thousand Vines had this ability, it would be extremely powerful. 135-7924? 6810 GGGGGD. However, this was not the only surprise. Just as Yi Xian was observing the Ghost Vine, dozens of different nomological powers suddenly attacked the God Tier Mount. These were dozens of different nomological powers. Could it be that the Ghost Vine had mastered dozens of nomological powers? System: what's going on? Why is the Ghost Vine able to master so many nomological powers? Ding! System notification. The Ghost Vine has a special ability, Devour and Store. Ding! The Ghost Vine will automatically capture the nomological powers that it can capture. Once it has successfully captured them, it will store them and use them as an attack when needed. There was such an ability? Yi Xian was slightly stunned. This ability was simply too powerful. However, it was probably only suitable for use in rented land. After all, super strong people could enter rented land at any time and die there. What was the nomological powers? It was a special power that could not be explained clearly. Even super strong people at the Emperor God Realm could only borrow nomological powers. However, when they reached the Emperor God Realm and died, the nomological powers they borrowed might be left behind for a short period of time, giving the Ghost Vine a chance to capture them. If it were someone else, such as the enemies Yi Xian had killed, how could the nomological powers be left behind? When they died, the nomological powers would automatically disappear without a trace. Therefore, this power was not something that Yi Xian could obtain. Even if he did, it would be useless. However, from here, it would undoubtedly become an obstacle for Yi Xian to kill the Ghost Vine. Thousand Beasts Feast. Yi Xian activated the Thousand Beasts Feast ability, which improved the mount's ability once again. Although Yi Xian did not expect to defeat the Ghost Vine with just the Thousand Beast Sword Servants and the God Tier Mount, Yi Xian hoped to understand the Ghost Vine's various abilities through the Thousand Beast Sword Servants and the God Tier Mount. The Ghost Vine continued to fight with the God Tier Mount, but it seemed to be crushing the God Tier Mount. Although the God Tier Mount kept attacking, it was futile even if they could destroy some of the Ghost Vine. After all, there were just too many Ghost Vines here. How many of them could the God Tier Mount destroy? Suddenly, Yi Xian noticed a problem. The Ghost Vine that was destroyed by the God Tier Mount did not seem to be regenerating immediately. Yi Xian's translation. The Ghost Vine Yi Xian at first because of the Thousand Vines Yi, but now it seemed like that was not the case. Swordsman Sword Servants. Yi Xian summoned the Swordsman.
Previously, Yi Xian didn't summon the Divine Flower Sword Attendant because he felt that even if the Divine Flower Sword Attendant came out, it wouldn't be of any use. Translation. Translation is translation Xian translation as on is translation Go destroy to your heart's content. Yi Xian ordered. Soon, all the god-tier mounts and the 100-flower god began to destroy the ghost vine. They were not the only ones. Wei Zhentian also charged forward with his 2 god-slayer swords. Yi Xian drew his rule divine bow again and again. Each shot a rule-devouring divine arrow. Yi Xian's goal was clear. He wanted to destroy at all costs. He wanted to destroy the ghost vine as much as possible. God-tier mounts were constantly being killed. At the same time, the ghost vine was also being cut down. Piece by piece, the ghost vine fell to the ground and turned into black smoke before disappearing. Yi Xian did not care about this at all. He only had one thought in his mind: destroy to his heart's content. Even if the ghost vine's power could be condensed, it was still condensed from his countless vines. At this moment, Yi Xian was continuously cutting down his vines. Didn't that mean that he was continuously weakening his strength? Although the god-tier mounts and the 100-flower god were constantly disappearing, Yi Xian was actually not at a disadvantage. Finally, when the last god-tier mount was killed, Yi Xian decisively withdrew from the battle. He was waiting. When the cooldown time was up, a new wave of attacks would erupt. Yi Xian wanted to wear down this 1,000 vines to death. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. Finally, most of the ghost vine had been cleared away. At this moment, Yi Xian was only left with a few hundred ghost vines. These ghost vines could no longer pose a threat to Yi Xian. At the same time, the so-called heart of the ghost vine was finally revealed. It turned out that the ghost vine was able to condense power. This so-called heart of the ghost vine was distributed to all the vines. As Yi Xian continued to kill, the power of the heart of the ghost vine could only continuously retreat to the remaining vines. Plants are plants after all. What a pity. Although you have such strong power, you are only a ghost vine. You only have battle instincts, but not true intelligence. Yi Xian said softly as he looked at the ghost vine in front of him calmly. Although he knew in his heart that the ghost vine could not possibly understand what he was saying. Kill! At Yi Xian's command, the cooldown time was up again. Then, he summoned the 1,000 beast sword servants and the flower god sword servants. They immediately charged forward with their god-tier mounts and the 100-flower god. The 2 god-slaying swords would not be left behind. They also charged forward. Sections of the ghost vine were continuously cut down. Finally, when all the ghost vine disappeared, a dark green light was left behind. That was the so-called heart of the ghost vine. Enchanting. Yi Xian did not hesitate. He had fought for so long to strengthen Enchanting. Enchanting suddenly charged forward and absorbed the group in a moment. Unfortunately, it did not level up. Well, if only Enchanting could level up that easily. However, Yi Xian could clearly feel that Enchanting's power had increased by a lot. Especially now that Enchanting had the ability to gather power, it was naturally more powerful. Asterisk, / equals Yi Xian did not waste any more time. He immediately got up and charged into the distance again in search of his next target. However, what Yi Xian did not know was that the ghost vine was actually the lowest level existence in the ancestral land. It would not be an exaggeration to call it a weed. However, just a mere weed in this ancestral land had such a powerful strength that it blocked Yi Xian's path for more than half a month. It was obvious how powerful the ancestral land was. In fact, Yi Xian knew very well that it was impossible to explore the entire ancestral land in one go.